Lord of Mysteries, Survival from the Secret Doll Chapter 321 to 330. Chapter 321, Original Witch. In Euclidean space. He narrowed his eyes, watching Kike, who was smiling cheerfully, then looked suspiciously at Nether Emperor Salinger not far away. Why did these two, one after another, reek so strongly of Alistair Tudor? These three men, no, these two men and one woman are in a love triangle. He loves her, she loves him, he loves him. What kind of strange relationship is this? System. Host, it seems something strange has slipped in. Alistair Tudor must be hungry. What a little glutton. System. The system silently spat out some cybergastric acid. It always felt that its host's mental state was becoming increasingly abnormal, and sometimes the things he said were disgustingly systemic. No. Tang quickly reflected on his own issues. He was focusing on the wrong thing. Now was not the time for gossip. Such matters could wait until he was huddled in some corner later. The current priority was, he began rapidly pulling out and then stuffing back historical void images. No, this isn't right either. This isn't right either. One after another, historical void images of Hunter sequence Beyonders Tang had seen before, or were simply his marionettes, continuously appeared and disappeared. Among them, Tang even pulled out Medici's historical void image and compared it with Salinger and the original witch, but the results still left him disappointed. Inferring some of the arrangements the original god made, based on the fact that the witch pathway's ritual for becoming a god involves the Chaos Sea, and combining this with the fact that both the god of the First Epoch and the celestial worthy accommodated multiple source materials, leading to their demise, it's pretty much set in stone that the god inserted things that shouldn't have been there into the two calamity pathways. Especially since Tang himself had a conqueror, and he had also seen the Red Angel evil spirit. Tang had also seen some residual influence of the original god, that bad seed, on Soren Einhorn Medici. He therefore concluded that the second pitfall of the witch and hunter pathways was the original god's means of resurrection. As for the first pitfall, that would naturally be the witch's sequence 7 and the hunter's sequence 4, but that had little to do with him. Therefore, it was normal for Medici, the original witch, Alistair Tudor, and Salinger, all true gods or angel kings of the two calamity pathways, to possess a certain mysticism similarity in the aspect of the original god's partial will reviving. But the problem Tang was looking for was not this. After searching through the historical void images of the hunter pathway beyonders around him, even Medici, who followed the ancient sun god and could be considered the most ancient angel king, the closest to the Red Priest, did not have that strange thing. It seemed the problem indeed did not lie in the Beyander characteristics or the Red Priest, but in Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor. This was something that wasn't present when Medici was in control but only appeared after Alistair Tudor became the Red Priest. Finishing the act of pulling historical projections, Tang continuously expanded his observation angles and deepened his observation levels using the observer and Euclidean space's authority, while also retrieving the sun scepter from the historical mist. A hermit, a sequence 0, cannot handle it alone. Salinger and Kike together can evoke the symbol of the catastrophe of destruction, especially given whatever Kike and Alistair Tudor did in the Fourth Epoch. The first question now was, what did Alistair Tudor do to the Red Priest? The second was, Alistair Tudor's mental imprint remained in the Red Priest's uniqueness and Beyander characteristics, so a semi-mad Salinger exhibited some of Alistair Tudor's traits. Tang could understand this. But why did the original witch have the imprint of Alistair Tudor, the Blood Emperor of the Tudor Empire during the Fourth Epoch? It was a very close connection, not like the relationship of having a few children. This level of mysticism correlation was not as simple as adjacent pathways or having a few children. The special mirror world they created, was it caused by that big pitfall? More potent mysticism symbols, the two calamity pathways, symbolizing the creator's feminine and masculine aspects. Alistair Tudor and the original witch almost dragged the gods to their graves with them in the Fourth Epoch. Trier sank underground. A special mirror world different from ordinary mirror worlds was born. Mirror people appeared, active among the nations of the North Continent, special mirrors. As Tang pondered this, his spirituality warned him, and he suddenly paused. The original witch, standing leisurely in the white mist created by the hermit, had subtly tilted her head at some point. She did not look at the hermit or Salinger, but rather at an empty space. This deity's hair, like a waterfall, floated up strand by strand, and at the ends of her hair, eyes opened one after another. Tang's observing movements paused. He looked at the original witch. The original witch seemed to be looking his way. She saw me. No, she probably only sensed him. If she had truly seen him, capable of penetrating space and dimensions, he would have been attacked immediately. But why could the original witch sense his presence? Tang, as the strongest diviner, narrowed his eyes. He held the sun scepter and calmly gave orders to the hermit and Nicola. Severely injure the original witch. If possible, turn her directly into a marionette of fate. The future influences the past, and the past influences the future. Past, present, and future are inherently a trinity. No matter what the original witch intended to do, influenced by fate, she would inevitably become a marionette of the future, walking a predetermined destiny. At that time, no matter what she and Alistair Tudor did, they would all be hung up as marionettes. In the real world, the hermit looked at the original witch Kike, who stood between him and Salinger. He was not affected by the charm of this highest-ranking witch. For the hermit, all desires and emotions, all memories and experiences, were segments of mad knowledge that could be edited, tampered with, deleted, and added. Even if a portion of the mad knowledge rebelled against the hermit due to the original witch's almost conceptual charm ability, the hermit could re-add the corresponding knowledge as long as the core knowledge was not tampered with, thereby achieving his own stable state. Why all this fighting and killing? The original witch Kike smiled. She was speaking to the hermit, to Salinger behind her, and to Nicholas Flamel, who was observing from the side. The natural charm effect caused both sides to pause, but the hermit's speed in breaking free from this state was clearly faster. We could clearly all three of us together. The original witch giggled, and with that, she once again displayed a smile towards the hermit. The hermit, crazy. A string of symbols appeared in the hermit's eyes. The arcane behemoth behind him roared, and once again, it slammed a monstrously huge fist, composed of countless mad knowledge, towards the original witch Kike and Salinger. Mad knowledge diffused, and sharp shrieks, one after another, and mad words, one after another, surged from the hermit's center towards his enemies. When Salinger saw Kike's smile, his figure wavered slightly. The illusory colors in this deity's eyes gradually turned iron black again. He was like the Blood Emperor, coldly summoning countless undead puppets from the ground. Bone dragons, soldiers, burning with soul flames in the white mist, then devoured by illusory, formless flames. The flames compressed the range of the white mist, which had evolved from mad knowledge. Perhaps because the original witch, a symbol of disaster and chaos, was also present, the flames that would have originally been concealed by the hermit now burned more rapidly and fiercely. The arcane behemoth created by the hermit burned fiercely with these flames. At the same time, the undead puppets sacrificed themselves, charging for their emperor, crashing against the arcane behemoth's feet. A pale color also began to contaminate and climb onto the arcane behemoth's body. The hermit ignored the arcane behemoth. He had mystical resurgence, and instead aimed at the original witch Kike. Under her somewhat curious gaze, he quickly concealed her authority over manipulating mirrors. This rapid concealment could only target authorities that were not core symbols for Sequence 0 true gods, and some might only last for a few breaths, not very stable, and she could easily regain ownership of the authority. But sometimes, just those few breaths of time could accomplish many things. Nicola's main body, further away, swiftly pulled a mirror with an ancient, rustic decoration, appearing to be made of tree bark in an oval frame, from the historical mist. His other avatars, upon seeing the original witch Kike's smile, had already shown signs of infatuation. The time worms that had parasitized them had already returned to the historical mist as Nicola released them from parasitism. These avatars were all charmed. If the time worms returned to his main body, the corresponding influence would also return to him. Nicola, who wielded the authority of error, could of course create an error to reflect his main body's uncharmed state onto all avatars, but there was no need now. Because he was not targeting Salinger, who needed to win by numbers, accumulating possibilities through probability and trial and error to achieve his goal, but the original witch. To deal with the original witch, Nicola and Tang had already made corresponding arrangements. Nicola calmly manipulated the mirror he had pulled from the historical mist. He swiftly caressed the mirror's surface and quickly asked in Hermes language, "Mirror, mirror, who is the most beautiful woman in this world?" After saying this, Nicola quickly inverted the mirror, aiming its surface at Kike, who suddenly looked at him from not far away. Kike's figure was reflected on the surface of the magic mirror in Nicola's hand. The mirror's surface rippled, as if something had awakened. The originally hazy mirror surface was like a tranquil lake into which a stone had been thrown. The reflected Kike in the mirror smiled alluringly. She seemed to be the most perfect woman, with a charm that could even enthrall rules, her eyes filled with laughter, gazing at Nicola, who was holding the mirror at this moment. But soon, this seemingly flawless face was gradually replaced by another. Long black hair turned into slightly curly chestnut hair, and a pair of azure eyes held a hint of tenderness. Her face became gentle rather than alluring. It was a female Rosal the Great, wearing maternity clothes, with a bulging belly, full of maternal radiance. That was the Mother card's face. Sequence 0, Mother. Completely transformed in appearance, the female Rosal the Great, who had gradually changed from reflecting the original witch's figure, now gently touched her abdomen, gazing at the original witch Kike outside the mirror, her expression soft and loving, as if looking at her most mischievous child. "Of course it's you, Mama." The magic mirror let out a cracking sound, seemingly on the verge of shattering. That sharp voice, filled with deep affection for a mother, accompanied the complete shattering of the magic mirror, returning to the historical mist. The authority concealed by the hermit returned to the original witch's body, but at this moment, the original witch suddenly erupted with clusters of crimson light. This could no longer be transferred using mirror substitutes. The curse, already hid under the authority of error, would indiscriminately attack all mirror substitutes and mirror people representing the original witch. And these lights drilled into the original witch Kike's flesh, bringing her new life. The next moment, behind the hermit, a deep, dark, mad beam of light praising the sun suddenly appeared. In Euclidean space, Tang picked up the sun scepter. Black, mad sunlight emanated from the twisted sun symbol on the scepter. He aimed the twisted sun symbol at the top of the scepter at the original witch, whose body was constantly cracking, petrifying, and then regenerating, and at Salinger behind the original witch. Madly praising the sun, the black tide of defiled and corrupted sunlight materialized, plummeting rapidly from higher dimensions into lower dimensions, engulfing the bodies of the original witch and Nether Emperor Salinger. The hermit struck again, utilizing the connection established with the system and knowledge wilderness. In his historical void image state, his body fully erupted into mad knowledge, expanding to swallow Nether Emperor Salinger. Mad knowledge, like bombs wrapped in mad pollution, along with information of fate and future, surged towards the original witch and Nether Emperor Salinger's body, mind, and spirit. All around, whether undead puppets or arcane behemoths, were assimilated by the mad knowledge, surging into a wilderness formed by knowledge. Nicola rapidly dissipated, entering Euclidean space to evade the hermit's suicidal attack. "How is it?" Nicola asked. Tang's lips curled slightly. "It failed. Kike, that crazy woman, brought out the symbol of the catastrophe of destruction." Chapter 322, Sequence 0, The Supreme One. Deep within the underworld, the rampant knowledge, which had been in a state of dissipation, abruptly contracted, recoalescing into a vague, fragmented light and shadow compared to before. Half of the incomplete light and shadow was shrouded in a void-like glow, as if it had suffered an irreparable catastrophe of destruction, completely devoid of the frenzied quality that could burst the brains of all who gazed upon it. The rampant knowledge became silent, already dead, completely destroyed. The hermit raised his gaze, looking at the war mist that had, at some unknown point, dispersed from Salinger. The war mist replaced the knowledge that the hermit had previously used to counter the destructive flames born from the fusion of the Red Priest's destructive fire and the Death God's authority. It failed. With little fluctuation in his voice, the hermit, whose specific vocal characteristics were indiscernible, looked at his body, which had been severely damaged the moment it came into contact with Salinger and the original witch during his suicidal attack. The original witch had been waiting for him to walk into her trap. Indeed, the deeper symbolic connection between the Red Priest and the original witch allowed the original witch to utilize the authority of catastrophe of destruction, root of disaster, to a limited extent, without needing her to truly become the pinnacle of the two disaster pathways. From within the mist, the graceful figure of the original witch, Khoi, slowly emerged, a smile playing on her lips, her long hair falling in distinct strands. It seems we have the advantage on this side. The hermit's eyes flickered. He attempted to once again mend his body structure, which had been destroyed by the symbol of the catastrophe of destruction, but unfortunately, the original witch and Salinger had already used a special mystical connection to form an unstable catastrophe of destruction, root of disaster, that pierced half of his body, destroying his core knowledge. The damaged breach was irreparable. It truly seemed he could only go this far. No wonder Salinger and the original witch, one a half-mad quasi-old one and the other a sequence zero, dared to provoke the pale disaster at the end of the Fourth Epoch and contend with the seven gods. If they had such a trump card, they could indeed try, but the outcome was quite clear. The seven gods were still stronger. Then, the original witch, Khoi, moved her thin lips slightly, smiling as she looked at the hermit before her, her ocean blue eyes reflecting the hermit's appearance. It seems we can't reach an agreement, can we? Actually, I'm very curious what you truly look like beneath this current appearance. The original witch, Khoi, paused slightly here, then her smile widened, not resisting. The witch's black flames and curses arrived in an instant, and the hermit, as the original witch had said, did not make a final death struggle. Under the original witch's curse, the hermit's bodily composition was damaged, and his figure twisted and faded. He was just an image from the historical void. Why would he fight for his life here? It's as if defeating him would truly mean winning. Ridiculous. What are you even burning for? Historical projection. The original witch's expression changed. Her surprise was understandable, as the hermit's recent display far exceeded what a historical void image could achieve. The diviner pathway's manipulation of the historical mist cannot pull out unique items, and a sequence zero, which accommodates three sequence ones and uniqueness, is naturally included in this category. But that was merely a disguise created by the system, borrowing the power of the knowledge wilderness. And in the hands of an angel king with the authorities of fooling and error, such a disguise is almost impossible to see through. The hermit you see possesses both the sequence zero's status and its strength, so isn't he a sequence zero? Making the fake indistinguishable from the real, turning decay into wonder, this is inherently the forte of the three mystic pathways. Is someone from the diviner pathway nearby? Antigonus. Salinger's hoarse voice came from behind Khoi. No, it's not Antigonus. Kike's eyes flickered. She almost immediately noticed the lingering traces of grafting from a cryptic servant at the spot where the hermit vanished. The next second, this deity who controlled disaster ignited the grafted traces, and the curse followed the trajectory of the grafting, actually aiming to directly curse the ancient scholar who was manipulating all of this. But faster than her were successive attacks from all directions, black, frenzied, black sun rays praising the sun. The Sun Scepter utilizes a comprehensive set of extraordinary abilities from the five all-knowing and all-powerful pathways. Although they only involve the angel level and cannot have too strong an impact on true gods, Tang chose this magical item instead of other more destructive sealed artifacts because the Sun Scepter itself is special. The Sun Scepter possesses a unique extraordinary ability, reinforced by the knowledge wilderness, capable of influencing a single item within a certain range. Sun Ascension, the defiled sun emerging from the Chaos Sea. The enemies Tang currently faced were the pinnacles of the two disaster pathways, with spiritual imprints reviving within their bodies, originating from the original god. And the original god is precisely the Chaos Sea, the old one corresponding to the 5 all-knowing and all-powerful pathways. With such a connection, how could it not be exploited? The black sun rays that had just cooperated with the hermit in a suicidal attack already contained a portion of pollution from the Chaos Sea. If contact continued for long enough, the god would truly awaken. Moreover, why do you believe that the symbol of the catastrophe of destruction can erase the hermit's authority and symbol? As the black sun rays once again bombarded the area, this time Tang targeted all areas where the war mist was dissipating, launching a full map, comprehensive bombardment. This was to stimulate the original god's imprint to further revive, causing trouble for Salinger and the original witch, and also to cooperate with a piece of rampant knowledge that the hermit had left within Salinger and Kike. We come from a future that underwent an anomaly after the Euclidean space and the eternal darkness river overlapped. Our existence, in the past, was equivalent to a fate from the future, as well. In the future, Salinger fell, the death god's uniqueness was sealed in a mausoleum in the violent sea, the Byron Empire lost control over the Starry Plateau and Paw River Valley, etc. The original witch was severely wounded, defeated by the combined efforts of the 7 gods during the Pale Disaster. These countless pieces of information were mixed within the hermit's rampant knowledge, but most of it had already been destroyed by the symbol of catastrophe of destruction root of disaster, and did not serve its intended purpose. However, there was one point they could not destroy, or rather, from the moment they first saw the hermit, and then Nicola, if they didn't leave but instead interacted with them, this was already an inevitable fate. Why the hermit exists here, why the angel king of the thief pathway changed, who can break into the depths of the underworld and have a close blood connection with Nether Emperor Salinger. Everything, all of it, would, due to fate, evolve into mad knowledge, spreading, polluting, and dissipating on Salinger and the original witch, ultimately hanging them on the long river of fate in the future, turning them into puppets of fate. Cognition, consciousness, and memory could all evolve into the most insane knowledge. This is the hermit, a great existence standing at the pinnacle of the seer pathway. Tang's eyes, which were as dark as the deep sea, were at some point filled with tiny, brilliant light. He watched the hermit's historical void image return to the historical mist, a smile on his lips, with no intention of stopping it. This was the value the hermit had displayed, using death to intensify this insane knowledge. What? Use their own authority to clear this part of the memory. Of course, it was possible. Salinger controlled death, and the original witch controlled destruction. There was no problem in clearing away this insane knowledge. But the question was, would they do that? These things are both pollution and intelligence. If they were easily destroyed, then for Salinger and Kike, they would face a complete memory wipe, becoming bewildered and caught off guard, completely unaware of what they were doing or who they were fighting. In this state of ignorance, they would continue to fight a divine war with me. Of course, if this part of the mad knowledge were destroyed, due to the interconnectedness of knowledge, they would fall into a dead loop of, what is this? Amnesia spray it, what is this? It was better to bear it. After all, mad knowledge, through grafted authority, was also connected to mad knowledge. Clearing only a part of it would cause the remaining mad knowledge to surge again on their bodies and spirits, with poor effect, one after another. Therefore, the only choices for Salinger and Kike were to clear it or not to clear it. But no matter which one, it was wrong, wasn't it? This kind of game is interesting. Tang looked at his own system, which had returned with the grafting, and the curse from the original witch that followed. He first used Euclidean space to cleanse the curse, then glanced at Ask, who had already closed his eyes and consciously avoided the divine war, before descending from Euclidean space to the real world. In the depths of the underworld, where black sun and war mist dissipated, a humanoid figure appeared, flickering with strange, distorted layers like an old television set with poor reception. This figure, radiating distorted layers like an old television with poor reception, then pulled out a complete version of the hermit from the historical mist and grafted the system onto it. The previous hermit was gone, so just pull another one over. The three sneaky families had no other abilities, but their ability to annoy people was endless, wasn't it? Nicola appeared behind him, pulling down the brim of his hat. Next, I will be the main attacker, you will assist. The sun scepter in Tang's hand disappeared, and in contrast, he felt completely different from his usual self as a cryptic servant. Nicola nodded, his light brown eyes glancing at Tang's current state, then he quickly retreated a few steps, creating distance between himself, Tang, and the hermit. His figure instantly transformed into transparent insects with 12 segments, disappearing into the air. As the black sun indiscriminately caused further pollution, Salinger was clearly driven more completely insane. When this deity saw Tang and the reappearing hermit, the iron-black color in his eyes grew even denser, and he extended his hand sharply. In an instant, the earth seemed to tremble, and even the air died. Black, ominous, death symbolizing power struck Tang in the next moment, and Tang did not dodge or evade. The original witch's gaze narrowed. When she saw that figure, which looked even more indistinct and had a peculiar aura, like something with poor reception, an ominous premonition swirled in this deity's mind. This felt even more unsettling than when she saw the hermit. Salinger, retreat. The attacker is not normal. But Salinger at this moment was like an enraged lion, completely deaf to the original witch's cries. The iron black in his eyes grew even denser, and the corners of his mouth curved upward more and more, madness overflowing. Die. All of you, die. Return to the kingdom of death. Return to the bottom of the eternal darkness river. Tang's mouth also held a smile. Salinger's attack reached him, engulfing him. Then, there was light. Brilliant light, dazzling light. The reader, sequence 9, reader who observes a story, upon seeing the protagonist, sequence 8, fated one, of that story, comments on the story's direction and the personality, habits, and abilities of each character within it, forming fixed impressions and labeling them, sequence 7, critic. As the story progresses, he immerses himself in the entire narrative, but as a reader, he remains an outsider, lacking the ability to alter the story's direction, sequence 6, outsider. He objectively observes the story's multi-threaded development and, through the narrations, understands things unknown to the characters, sequence 5, narrator, also known as deductive scholar. He understood that the things unknown to the characters in the stories were the true context of the entire story. He finished reading the entire story, wrote out the timeline, and diligently studied it, sequence 4, chronologist. For those tragic characters who completely did not understand what happened, he felt heartbroken and helpless, powerless to stop the impending events in the story. He discovered that all characters were merely indispensable parts of the story, tiny yet important, their sole purpose being to drive the story's development. In this destined tragedy, everyone within the story is merely a puppet of fate, sequence 3, puppeteer. He is merely an observer of the story, able only to watch, not to intervene, sequence 2, observer. And everything in the story, all of it, is ultimately nothing more than inevitable plot points, leading to the final, already predetermined ending, sequence 1, fate. Therefore, the one who has read the entire story is the Supreme One. Sequence 0, Supreme One. Large swaths of light cut through the space-time here, countless brilliant lights flickered, and story fragments, like the images on an old television with poor reception, turned into countless pieces, swiftly flowing and streaking through the air. Euclidean space swallowed Salinger and the original witch. In the ocean of light, composed of fragments, Tang raised his eyes, a radiant smile on his face. Welcome to my divine kingdom. The original witch, who had just detected a problem and was pulled into an unfamiliar area, instinctively wanted to leave through a mirror. But there were no mirrors here, nor any substance capable of imaging. This was a world of light, composed of countless fragments, flowing incessantly and endlessly. In this place, she could not sense any mirrors, and even her mystic connection with the largest horror in the special mirror world became intermittent. Am I isolated? Were those who attacked them not only high-dimensional overseers of the seer pathway, but also high-dimensional overseers of the door pathway? No, Bertrand cannot do this. As one of the behind-the-scenes controllers of the Tudor dynasty, the original witch Kike's eyes flickered slightly, and a somewhat aged figure seemed to be reflected in her watery eyes. That was the leader of the Abraham family, the greatest noble family during the Tudor dynasty, Mr. Dor, whom even the Angel Kings would respectfully address as the Angel King closest to Dor. Bertrand, even if he could create a special space, still couldn't hinder the connection between the original witch and the deepest part of the special mirror world. After all, that was. All around were bizarre scenes, various strange fragments constantly flashing back around the original witch and Salinger, one after another, one section after another, rapidly flowing from in front of them to behind them, like an unstoppable river rushing towards its end. Besides this, the surroundings were silent, eerily quiet. A very strange place. The original witch assessed her own state. In the recent battle, the original god's imprint within her body had begun to show signs of revival. Having to restrain the one in the depths of the mirror world, fight against the original god, and simultaneously stabilize herself was a fatal weakness for the original witch, who didn't have many followers. Among all Sequence 0, excluding the 7 orthodox deities and the Nether Emperor Salinger, who possessed the Byron Empire, whether it was the original witch, the true creator, or the relatively low-profile dark side of the universe, even if they wanted to stabilize themselves, it was difficult to quickly achieve balance against the creator and the mental imprint left within the Beander characteristics without enough anchors. The lack of anchors was their weakness, while the Nether Emperor Salinger, due to his own death and Red Priest pathways, even with enough anchors, had fallen into a semi-mad state. I must leave this place as soon as possible. Kike, who was more rational than Salinger, thought so. But very quickly, her gaze froze. Among the rapidly flashing scenes around her, she saw a familiar person. That was herself, her younger self, still in a male form. The original witch Kike's expression became dazed. Her former appearance, which she hadn't thought of for a long time, suddenly appeared before her, causing her to feel a dizziness that shouldn't have occurred. This scene flashed by and quickly disappeared as the torrent of time rapidly receded, but the original witch looked at the bizarre, constantly flickering scenes and fragments around her, and she saw so much. Her childhood self, her first contact with a potion, her first kill, her becoming a witch, her sleeping with men. The scenes flickered continuously, rapidly receding, but as a witch at the sequence's peak, Kike's vision easily kept up with the receding images. Most of these scenes were blurry, fleeting, but many, many scenes, her precious, forgotten things, many things that only she and Tudor should have known. Kike's expression grew increasingly dull, followed by a soaring anger and madness that sought to destroy everything. How dare you! How dare you! Strands of hair stood on end, and at the end of each long strand was a suddenly opened eye. She saw a few more scenes, but these were affected by an unknown influence, making them even blurrier and harder to see clearly. But she knew that those scenes contained Alistair Tudor, and their greatest secret. Kill them, ha ha ha, let the whole world be destroyed together, this world should have been destroyed together. The original witch, under the influence of fate and the revived mental will of the original god, snapped. She was about to go mad. In the center of Euclidean space, Tang, as if by magic, flipped his palm, and 2 tarot card-sized cards appeared in his hand. The first card depicted a man in a deep black robe with a crazed expression, behind him an endless, dense army of undead. Nether Emperor Salinger. Tang's fingers moved slightly, separating the 2 stuck cards to reveal the face of the card behind it. That was the original witch, Kike, with a charming smile, radiating feminine charm even through the card, her hair distinct strand by strand, and her azure eyes like the purest gems in the world. Original witch, Kike. Character card. Nether Emperor Salinger, Mad God, Incarnation of Death and War collected into the illustration book. Character card. Original witch Kike, Source of Disaster, Destroyer, Chaos Witch collected into the illustration book. Tang paused when he heard the system prompt. Just now, it was as if it felt the gears of destiny turning, and the system, which had prompted its host without going through the cyber brain, was now bewildered. The system's cyber voice, "What the hell is this thing that just ran out?" suddenly rose a notch, making Tang subconsciously rub his ears. Host, there's a ghost. What is this thing? Did the main system get a virus? It's nothing, it should be a change brought by the Supreme Being. Tang resisted the urge to mute his system's electronic high-pitched voice and looked towards the location of Salinger and Kike. After checking himself 3 layers in and 3 layers out and finding no abnormalities, the system finally realized what they were doing. "Host, aren't you going to kill them?" The system, seeing its host say he would be the main attacker, but making no move so far, was a bit strange. "Host, you've already unleashed your ultimate, why are you just standing there? Go and kill them." Tang. Why did he feel his system was getting more irritable? "Knowledge wilderness, are you really not going to check it? What kind of monster has it evolved into?" To borrow a line the original witch said not long ago. Why must there be so much killing? System, what is our objective? The system thought with its cyber brain. Kill the Nether Emperor, dig up the grave, retrieve the uniqueness. And the problems with the original witch and the mirror world, this system remembers all of it. Tang's mouth twitched. You know all that, so why do I have to fight these two? And what's with killing the Nether Emperor, and what's with digging up graves? Wait, system, you didn't read some weird novel again, did you? System. About that. The system fell silent, and Tang was speechless. He looked again at the brilliant crystals in the Euclidean space he was controlling, where Salinger and Kike were trapped, and his expression solidified. If this battle really started, it would be incredibly difficult. Neither the original witch nor the Nether Emperor are easy to deal with. Even if he is currently at the Sequence 0 level, with the assistance of Nicola and the Hermit, simultaneously facing Salinger and Kike wouldn't result in a quick victory where they'd be beaten to a pulp in minutes. However, he wasn't here to fight to the death, there was no need to do anything drastic to them. Fighting them head-on wasn't impossible. While instant kills weren't an option, relying on the cryptic servant's evasiveness and the observer's endurance, combined with historical void images, he felt he could wear them down without external interference. But the assimilation progress is already over 2/3. There's not much time to waste here with Salinger and Kike. Tang estimated the assimilation situation between the Euclidean space and the Eternal Dark River's tributary, and instructed the system to set a countdown for him as a reminder. Next, Tang looked at the Hermit beside him. The Hermit understood. His body, structured from knowledge, transformed into a raging torrent, carrying the system, and surged once more towards Salinger and Kike. Nicola was already approaching Salinger and Kike, pondering how best to proceed. Although I'm the main attacker, it's better not to act personally if it can be avoided. He would remotely control the Euclidean space, using the characteristics of his divine kingdom to suppress Salinger and Kike. Then, the Hermit and Nicola would assist. One would use insane knowledge to make their state more akin to marionettes controlled by fate, and the other would steal something from Kike. Caution was paramount. Even when suppressed by the Euclidean space, that madwoman Kike might still do something strange and dangerous. Tang watched as the Hermit and Nicola approached Salinger and Kike, and began to use the Supreme Being's authority to do his real work. The core authorities of a Supreme Being lay in 2 points, observation and interference. For a Supreme Being, being able to observe meant being able to interfere, and being able to interfere naturally meant being able to manipulate. Knowing the future, influencing the past, existing in the present, before a Supreme Being, no God or human could hold secrets. While this impossibility of secrets was only relative, it was enough to show the Supreme Being's stark difference from an audience in the realm of observation. The latter achieved it through the collective subconscious ocean, while the former did so through his own authority and eyes. And the Supreme Being, unlike other pathways, other Sequence 0s, and even all the gods and great existences in this world, has one unique point. After personally experiencing the state of a Supreme Being, Tang once again keenly felt that he truly wasn't from this world. The symbol of the fourth pillar, the symbol of the universe's end, the catastrophe of destruction, the root of disaster, more precisely, is ineffective against me. A true, outsider, is unaffected by such conceptual symbols. Even if the universe restarted, the Creator reclaimed all authority, resurrected once more, and then disintegrated due to internal contradictions. In this process, the Supreme Being, or rather, Tang as a transmigrator, would not be destroyed by it. He did not originate from the original God. Birth and destruction were merely things briefly mentioned in a book to him. The pathways compatible with, adjacent to, or able to be subordinated to and supplement the Supreme Being are Sequence 0, Eternal Calamity, Dancer Pathway, whose old one is the Ring of Destiny. Sequence 0, Eye of the Mortal World, Painter Pathway, whose old one is the High-Dimensional Overseer. Above sequence, after obtaining one Sequence 1 Beander characteristic and uniqueness from the Supreme Being, Eternal Calamity, and Eye of the Mortal World pathways, one can occupy the old one position of the High-Dimensional Overseer pathway and become the new High-Dimensional Overseer. Because as a transmigrator, he was more compatible with the authority and position of the High-Dimensional Overseer. Why did the High-Dimensional Overseer go mad? The old one God, on the day a new God was born, would become the most nutritious sustenance for the new God. However, this is one aspect. If the Supreme Being is compatible with both the High-Dimensional Overseer and Ring of Destiny Old One pathways, as long as I become the Supreme Being, find the High-Dimensional Overseer and Ring of Destiny, and devour them, then I will be the new High-Dimensional Overseer and Ring of Destiny. Beyond that, the above sequence formed by the fusion of these three pathways, because it incorporates the essence of a transmigrator, spanning past, present, and future, and usurping the position of High-Dimensional Overseer, is called Upper Narrator. Omniscient, omnipotent, twisting matter, modifying logic. The pinnacle above sequence. This was also one of the reasons Tang was determined to rectify the Lord of the Mysteries. Becoming the Lord of the Mysteries would prevent him from assimilating the High-Dimensional Overseer and Ring of Destiny, and thus becoming this, Old One. And within the core authority of the Upper Narrator was something Tang needed. Found it. His thoughts paused, and Tang tilted his head. His gaze caught a fleeting fragment near Kaik. In that fragment, like a television with bad reception filled with static, Tang saw a pair of eyes. A pair of iron-black eyes, extremely similar to the Nether Emperor Salinger's previous eyes. Those eyes revealed an extreme shade of madness. Those were the eyes of the Blood Emperor, Alistair Tudor. Because of the positions of the original witch and Alistair Tudor, and the great trouble they caused, this fragment, symbolizing the original witch's core secret, remained blurred and difficult to discern even under the Supreme Being's manipulation, making it hard to see what was truly hidden within. The original witch realized something. Her hair suddenly surged towards the surrounding images, and the Euclidean space trembled along with it. The symbol of destruction had arrived. Salinger's expression and face were now constantly transforming into the likeness of Alistair Tudor. This god's hair was gradually turning blood red. The Red Priest suppressed the Death God, and under the catalysis of the Euclidean space and the Hermit, showed a stronger resemblance to the Blood Emperor. Chapter 324, The Blood Emperor. Within Euclidean space. Among the rapidly flowing fragments around the original witch, every frame, every image, began to show the figure of a person she only found unfamiliar. From the time Kaik was born, a person stood silently gazing outside the window, to when Kaik was promoted to Sequence 7 witch, transformed into a female due to the inherent imagery of the Beander characteristic, and when she was on the verge of losing control due to pain, a quiet, shadow-like person watched from the corner. From this witch killing one enemy after another, to seducing one man after another, one woman after another, to sleep with her, killing them in bed, to her gradually becoming a demigod, advancing to despair. Every frame, every scene, every memory point, like a maggot clinging to bone, a blurry figure, yet one she began to find familiar, was continuously appearing, becoming a part of her memory. Kaik petrified a surge of mad knowledge that abruptly appeared before her. Her gaze then swept over the fragments and images that, even when petrified and cursed, still rapidly appeared and darted past them. Kaik, showing signs of madness due to Tang's deliberate guidance, suddenly felt something was amiss. She recalled her memories with great bewilderment. Was there really such a person in her memories? Was there such a person who had been by her side from her birth to her existence as a sequence zero, from beginning to end, from start to finish? How could that be? How could there be such a person? But, she seemed to remember that such a person really did exist. Real. Fake. What can be observed can be interfered with. Tang stood in the distance, utilizing the extraordinary ability brought by the bestowed power at the high one level, using the observed subject's character card, original witch, as an entry point to intervene in the other party's divine career. Next, accompanied by the authority of observer, Tang's own projection would, through Euclidean space as a medium, continuously project into the original witch's life with the authority of the High One, from birth to demise, from beginning to end. He would appear in every time period and every important node. He would stand beside the original witch, silently observing everything about the original witch, looking down from above, observing what this god had seen, thought, and understood, comprehending all of her actions. Thereby, interfering with her past. The past influences the future, and the future influences the past. This can form a constantly rotating wheel of destiny, forming a ring of destiny where the beginning and the end are integrated. And what can be interfered with can be manipulated. Tang, rapidly eroding the original witch with the authority of the High One, simultaneously extended his hand in all past fragments of the original witch, in all constantly flashing images at the same moment. Fine, shimmering threads of faint light descended from his hand. These puppet strings, woven from fate and destiny, were about to connect to the not yet powerful, still unaware original witch, Khoi. In the process of ignorance, one after another, threads of fate, named puppet threads, continuously appeared in the river of fate of each weak original witch, pulling the river of fate towards a predetermined fate. Sequence 3, Marionettist. Who is the puppet of fate? Unlike the marionettist spirit worm threads, which manipulate a person's flesh and spirit, the marionettist of the High One pathways Sequence 3 is most adept at manipulating the fate of all people, making them rush non-stop towards the direction called future, according to a predetermined trajectory. The marionettists manipulate the puppet strings in their hands, controlling the past of the puppets under the sway of fate, influencing their present, and leading them to rush towards a destined future. As an experienced marionettist, Tang was naturally skilled at manipulating the fate of others. And with the invasion of the High One, the original witch, who had already sensed something was wrong, began to counterattack. As the original witch Khoi, possessing the uniqueness of the witch pathway, she naturally had the ability to make all things themselves unique, an ability inherent to Sequence 0, or rather, to uniqueness itself. The uniqueness of time and space, the uniqueness of fate, the uniqueness of imprints, the unique characteristic of uniqueness itself can only exhibit abnormal error under the interference of a special, far more powerful force, and a great existence possessing corresponding authority. For example, the fool who does not belong to this era. Currently, the Euclidean space where the original witch and Nether Emperor Salinger are located is quite special. The unique characteristic of uniqueness itself has been subtly influenced, resulting in error, presenting a peculiar phenomenon where multiple images appear in one time and space, with past, present, and future intertwined. This made the divine careers of original witch Khoi and Nether Emperor Salinger like an opened box, constantly appearing and unfolding, then being invaded by the authority of the High One. Under the invasion of the High One's authority, if all of the original witches, past, completely transformed into puppets of fate in the marionettist's hand, then it would mean the original witch had truly become a soulless marionette, numbly moving towards a predetermined outcome under future and fate. Therefore, the original witch, sensing something was wrong and feeling increasingly so, now chose destruction. Destroy everything, whether past, present, or future. A mad glint flashed in Kike's eyes. She smiled with breathtaking beauty, a smile so enchanting that even rules and order seemed unwilling to harm this most beautiful lady in the world. The hermit appeared out of thin air when the mad Khoi was about to destroy all past images, destroying her own past. He was not greatly affected by the original witch's charm. And the hermit possesses the authority of knowledge and concealment. For the hermit, after transforming into the most insane torrent of knowledge, if the person in front of him cannot learn the knowledge, then let their head explode. After all, he is like those old pedants from the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Sometimes, he can equally discriminate against all minds that cannot absorb knowledge. Salinger, not far away, witnessed this scene. The Nether Emperor, who was gradually transforming into the Blood Emperor, blinked his iron-black eyes slightly. Just as he was about to act, another hermit appeared behind him. The hermit can replicate itself through data replication. Besides Salinger, Tang's figure also appeared. The attack, originally aimed at the hermit, suddenly curved and struck Tang. His body instantly turned pale, transforming into countless transparent, translucent spirit worms. Tang was hit by Salinger's attack and returned to the historical mist. He was merely an image from the historical void. Tang smiled and disappeared, and within the fragmented scenes and moments belonging to Nether Emperor Salinger, a blurred figure was also continuously forming, gradually filling every frame. The authority of the High One was also eroding this half-mad, dual-pathway true god. The fragmented hermit, meanwhile, was interfering with Nether Emperor Salinger and original Witch Kike's attempts to manipulate those fragments concerning Tang, buying Tang time. Tang's figure went from nothingness to wholeness, from illusion to reality, until his form was completely solidified and the intrusion was complete. Only then did Tang look at the surrounding scene. He was standing in a magnificent palace, characteristic of Fourth Epoch Trier, but strangely, Tang did not immediately see Kike's frantic figure there. Turning a true god into a marionette is a rather troublesome and complex process. A true god, or rather, every angel, possessing a long lifespan, also possesses a multitude of life trajectories and historical fragments. This is different from the observation ability similar to the Gate of Paradise that Euclidean space once displayed. For a marionettist to weave past fragments and life experiences into the threads of fate, they need to utilize the observer's ability to project themselves into every fragment. The longer a god has lived, the slower this process of marionettification by fate becomes, and the more susceptible they are to counterattacks from that god or angel. So Tang had the hermit stall original Witch and Nether Emperor Salinger, to buy him time and gather as much information as possible. In the remaining time, he couldn't fully read Salinger and Kike's complete memories and then control them. Fortunately, he had no intention of turning these two true gods into his marionettes anyway. It was too troublesome, too time-consuming, and had too many unpredictable factors. Since it was a coincidental opportunity, he decided to quit while he was ahead. Through his spiritual intuition and an overview of Kike's past history and memories, Tang found the parts most severely affected by status and external forces, then projected himself in. At the end of the day, it's just a sequence 0, not yet beyond sequence. At that level, one should be able to quickly complete the projection and turn a sequence 0 into a marionette of fate. However, Tang looked around, stroking his chin in thought, that's strange. I remember I should have entered a certain memory of the original witch, so why isn't the original witch here? At this, Tang paused slightly. Following his spiritual intuition as a diviner, he looked up at the unfamiliar man sitting at the highest point of the magnificent palace, and asked with a smile. Greetings, Your Majesty the Blood Emperor. May I ask, do you know where the original witch is? The man sitting at the highest position in the palace was about 30 years old, with the consistent tough guy appearance of the Red Priest pathway. He was currently looking down at Tang. From Tang's perspective, he could easily see a pair of azure eyes filled with madness and cruelty. Very good, perfectly fitting Tang's stereotype of Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor. They seemed so similar to his grandfather and the frantic Kike's current states, both such beautiful mental states. Looks like he found the right place. If Kike was a lunatic, then Alistair Tudor was the biggest madman of the Fourth Epoch. Not to mention the bizarre things he did, like forcefully changing pathways to make himself half mad. Later, he even created a source material hodgepodge, moving Trier underground and almost dragging all living beings with him to their graves. The problems of underground Trier haven't been solved even now, and there's also the mirror world and the great disaster he created, whose exact nature is still unclear. Alistair Tudor and Kike were truly a match made in heaven, a perfect pair of lunatics, a truly outrageous pairing mechanism. Ha 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 ha. Upon hearing Tang's question, the Blood Emperor suddenly burst into laughter. He stood up abruptly, his mouth splitting open, his azure eyes, filled with madness and cruelty, staring unblinkingly at Tang below. Tang stood still, unfazed. He tilted his head slightly, his originally pitch-black eyes shimmering with brilliant, tiny lights. "What's so funny, Your Majesty? Did I ask something out of the ordinary?" "No, of course not." Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor walked down from the high platform step by step, his dangerous, mad aura pressing down, causing Tang to frown slightly. "Aren't you asking where Kike is?" He stood still until the Blood Emperor, Alistair Tudor, walked over and stood before him. Tang slightly raised his head, looking at the notorious Blood Emperor of the Fourth Epoch, who was a head taller than him. Just as he was about to say something, Alistair Tudor reached out and grabbed Tang's neck. He said nothing, simply grabbed Tang's neck and snapped it. The sound of the neck breaking was crisp and pleasant to the ear. Tang's gaze froze on his face, seemingly surprised by how decisive this fellow was. "Just you." Malice and madness poured out from this half-mad god. After Tang's neck was snapped, he was flung away, creaking in midair, his body shattering like a mirror. It was like an imperfect television image finally breaking down completely after a short circuit in its decaying wiring. So that's how it is. As Tang's body scattered and shattered like glass, a fragment of one of his eyes remained suspended in midair, not quickly turning to dust and vanishing into nothingness like the other fragments. "So, this is why the original witch has your mental imprint." Alistair Tudor looked down at this eye. He reached out again, seemingly wanting to destroy this eye as well. Behind him, a figure wearing a black silk top hat and a matching tailcoat also slowly emerged. "Where do you think the error, which was supposed to deal with the original witch and Nether Emperor Salinger, is now?" Tang's remaining eye narrowed slightly, his voice coming from an unknown void. "The true Blood Emperor, Alistair Tudor, is already dead. Most of his spirit worms are imprisoned in the eternal dark river. You are the Alistair Tudor in the mirror, right? And the big trouble you and the original witch created is actually." Chapter 325, Grafting. Nicola, like a true gentleman, removed the black silk top hat from his head. His gaze was deep and imbued with an indescribable quality of a supreme being as he looked at Alistair Tudor. When his figure fully appeared behind Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor also turned his head. In the mirror world, Alistair Tudor's information gathering and reaction speed were faster than expected. Nicola smiled slightly at Alistair Tudor, then raised the top hat in his hand. "A pleasure to meet you for the first time, Your Majesty the Blood Emperor. I am the new blasphemer. My apologies for the intrusion." The hat in his hand vanished, and a larger black silk top hat directly enveloped Alistair Tudor's entire body. The enormous black silk top hat stood in the palace. Nicola snapped his fingers, and the top hat that had swallowed the Blood Emperor began to shrink rapidly, about to return to its original size. Even for an image from the historical void, Nicola possessed the power of a sequence one-time worm. Although he couldn't yet involve the uniqueness, he could still use the core authority of the thief pathway to construct a small divine kingdom full of error and loopholes to contain Alistair Tudor from the mirror, treating him as an error. This isn't Kike's memory. Well, to be more precise, it's not just Kike's memory. Tang, who now only had one eye, had his body, like a jigsaw puzzle, being reassembled and restored to wholeness as the projection of the Supreme Being continuously poured into this fragment. It's quite normal for the original witch, a deity who controls the mirror world, to have parts of her core secret memories linked to a special mirror world. Tang paused his voice at this point. Nicola was about to take the shrunken black silk top hat and place it on his head when the hat suddenly expanded and exploded in front of Nicola and Tang. As expected, he's not that easy to deal with. Nicola quickly retreated, and Tang snapped his fingers. The top hat disintegrated, returning to the historical mist. Nicola pulled another top hat from the historical mist and then politely retreated. The mirrored Alistair Tudor, emerging from the top hat, looked at Nicola, who had retreated a few steps but still wore a smile. His gaze lingered for a moment, then quickly shifted towards Tang. Compared to Nicola, who was a historical void image, the mirrored Alistair Tudor, possessing an almost beast-like intuition, believed that Tang, whose neck he had twisted but who still existed in an unknown state, was clearly more dangerous. A very correct choice. Tang smiled, causing the historical mist to churn. As his fingers snapped, a hermit filled with mad knowledge appeared beside the mirrored Alistair Tudor. Pulling one from outside, pulling one from inside, oh, these are all standard operations. Then, Tang snapped his fingers again and again. Pull a few more, surely the Blood Emperor wouldn't mind, right? One hermit after another emerged from the historical mist, surrounding the mirrored Alistair Tudor. Nicola twirled his black silk top hat. He split off time worms to cooperate with Tang, causing the mirrored Alistair Tudor to temporarily freeze in place due to the parasitism. The figures of the hermits pulled from the historical mist rapidly expanded, and their mad knowledge continuously spread outwards. Then, they exploded. These were historical void images of hermits before their suicidal attacks, which Tang directly pulled out and used as bombs filled with mad knowledge. First round. Mad knowledge carpet bombing. Time was running out. He wondered if he could hang the mirrored Alistair Tudor as a marionette before the original which reacted and before the Euclidean space and the eternal Dark River tributary completed their fusion. After all, for error, if the mirrored Alistair Tudor was his marionette, it meant the Blood Emperor submerged in the eternal Dark River was his marionette, and it also meant that the deepest thing in the mirror was his marionette. The explosion of mad knowledge did not hinder the mirrored Alistair Tudor's actions much. To be precise, the mad knowledge could not hinder his own will. For deities already on the brink of madness, the pollution brought by mad knowledge was merely a fuse that further intensified their state, causing it to spiral into a worse extreme. This Blood Emperor rushed out of the range of the mad knowledge, like a thrown spear, shooting towards Tang. His speed seemed to transcend the limits of distance, carrying the aura of destruction and the intent of madness, rapidly approaching Tang's direction. Tang calmly snapped his fingers. If the real Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor were in front of me, I would still have to be wary. His figure subtly flickered. The mirrored Alistair Tudor, transformed into a blood-stained spear, instantly arrived before Tang and then passed straight through his body. The observer had transformed his observable state into an unobservable state. Things that cannot be seen, heard, or understood do not exist. How could you possibly attack such things? Without Beander characteristics as support, without a uniqueness to maintain the sequence 0 position, the mirrored person cannot and is not capable of doing many things that a sequence 0 can. For example, the mirrored Alistair Tudor's resistance to the authority of the Supreme Being was not as strong as that of the original Witch and Salinger. As the cryptic servant who was currently considered the most mystic cryptic servant, Tang curled the corner of his mouth. While it wasn't so easy to deal with the original Witch and Salinger, it might be different with this one. His gaze caught the flames suddenly rising around him. Outside this palace, which had distinct Trier characteristics, thunder began to strike out of a clear sky. The mirrored Alistair Tudor, who had transformed into a blood-red spear, revealed his figure. The color of his eyes changed from azure to iron black, similar to Nether Emperor Salinger's state. This was the beginning of him using the authority of the Red Priest. Tang continued to snap his fingers. As he snapped his fingers, he pulled a monocle, carved like crystal, from the historical mist and placed it in his right eye socket. Then, Tang raised his hand towards Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor. Come on. As a mirrored person, Alistair Tudor's emotions and feelings were in an extreme state, and coupled with the fact that the original Blood Emperor Alistair Tudor was already in a bad state, remaining a half-mad lunatic until his death. As a mirrored person whose emotions were extreme and who had experienced a bout of mad knowledge, he naturally couldn't be in a good state either. Therefore, the mirrored Alistair Tudor took a step forward. He disdained to say anything more to Tang, who was hiding and not showing his true form, and simply launched an attack, intending to completely crush this intruder. But just as Alistair Tudor in the mirror took his first step, his pupils flickered. "Do you feel like something is a bit strange?" Noticing Alistair Tudor's gaze in the mirror sharpen, Tang smiled and asked. "Your Majesty, don't you think you originally intended to step out with your left foot?" Alistair Tudor looked at his right leg, which he had stepped out with, then raised his head to look at Tang. He did not speak. Thunderbolts from the sky struck down in response, piercing through the palace and hitting Tang. Tang once again transformed himself into an unobservable state, evading the attack. Flames around him suddenly rose, and a mysteriously appearing gale swept the flames, forming a massive, terrifyingly exaggerated fire tornado that completely engulfed Tang's figure. But these attacks were useless. He wasn't Obito. His complete intangibility didn't have a time limit. The observer's unobservable state is essentially a relocation from a lower dimension to an unperceivable higher dimension. As long as there is no ability or authority to invade Euclidean space, the observer's unobservable state, as long as his spirituality is abundant, is equivalent to a powerful buff that grants full damage immunity and miss. "Oh, I'm truly a very difficult to kill cryptic servant." Just as Alistair Tudor in the mirror was about to continue bombarding this strange fellow with various extreme weather phenomena, he suddenly cancelled the fire tornado and the continuous lightning bolts himself. "What's going on? Your Majesty, what's going on?" Tang, reappearing from within the fire tornado, asked with feigned goodwill, "Have you been in the mirror world for too long, to the point where even the most basic combat instincts have disappeared?" He sincerely suggested, "Do you need to go to a hospital to get your body checked? Or, try separating from original witch for a while." Provocation, blatant provocation. If Tang were given the potion of Provoker, he could digest 1,000 or 800 portions today. "What did you do?" Alistair Tudor in the mirror realized something. Ever since Tang snapped his fingers, his state had been problematic. Extreme does not mean brainless. Tang smiled, subtle brilliant lights shining in his eyes, which were as dark as a black ocean. "Why don't you, Your Majesty, guess yourself?" Tang had already been a Sequence 1, cryptic servant 1,000 years ago. With the authority of a supreme being, he played this sequence much better than Klein. If it's a hint, I can give one. I once studied the special relationship between a Beyander's body, mind, and spirit. Here, body refers to the body that has consumed the potion, undergone physical mutation, and transformed into a Beyander. Mind refers to the spirit beyond that, which in the spectator pathway can specifically refer to the consciousness island and the spiritual imprints hidden within the Beyander characteristics. Spirit directly refers to a person's spirit body. The system of mysticism knowledge in this regard is different from the popular mysticism's 5 levels of personality, namely, the mental body, mind body, astral body, etheric body, and physical body. The body, mind, spirit theory is actually a compression and extension of the 5 levels of personality. As a cryptic servant who has lived for thousands of years, as the de facto controller of Miskatonic University, a truly significant figure in the mysticism world, Tang had also participated in many mysticism-related studies. These studies are now documented in the Miskatonic Library in the form of theses, including extensive experience and extensions related to the cryptic servant sequence. And this includes how a cryptic servant utilized the Beyander ability of grafting to achieve various interesting things. For example, in my research, with the spirit as the dominant factor, a Beyander manipulates their flesh, which contains Beyander characteristics, through their spirit body modified by Beyander characteristics. In the process of manipulation, once an external force intervenes, it will cause manipulation errors and failures. General medicine believes that organisms can control their bodies because of the presence of the nervous system. Further deepening in mysticism is that there exists a spirit that is completely integrated with the flesh as a manipulative substance. Whether the brain is damaged or the spirit body is damaged, it will lead to the flesh of that person being unable to be effectively controlled. He altered Alistair Tudor's control over his own body, redoing the grafting corresponding from spirit to flesh. For example, grafting the control of blinking onto kicking, or grafting the control of walking onto kneeling and kowtowing. This is a rather twisted, but effective crowd control ability extension, though it's quite troublesome. Ordinary cryptic servants cannot achieve such precise control, only a cryptic servant simultaneously equipped with the observer can freely play with it. Therefore, Alistair Tudor, the Blood Emperor's mirror image, had to continuously adapt to his body, which was chaotically grafted, while continuing to fight Tang and Nicola. Tang found it a bit amusing to even imagine. If the Blood Emperor charged forward, only to suddenly kneel and kowtow. Of course, Alistair Tudor quickly reacted and adopted a corresponding strategy. Conquer. Sequence 1 of the Red Priest pathway. Conqueror can both turn others into his marionettes and turn himself into his own marionette. But it's too late. Tang smiled. That's why I said, if it were the real Alistair Tudor, I definitely wouldn't do this. The Supreme Being's intervention speed is much faster than a Red Priest, without Beander characteristics support. The moment you complete calibration, he can disrupt it again the next moment, and regraft it chaotically. The grafting method of the previous second is different from the grafting method of the next second, and the grafting method of the previous action is different from that of the next. At that time, Conquer will also be disrupted to the manipulation and use of other Beander abilities. Try them one by one. There's no time for that. I ask you, how do you fight? Of course, there is actually one more way. Tiny specks of light flickered in Tang's eyes. Release the greatest horror hidden in the mirror. Original Witch and Salinger, with the cooperation of Hermit and Euclidean Space, couldn't spare any attention to support Alistair Tudor. In such a clearly disadvantageous situation, would this extreme mirrored Alistair Tudor do that? The risk to be taken would be much greater than Alistair Tudor in the mirror being hung up and used as his marionette, wouldn't it? While Alistair Tudor's body had not fully adapted to this disrupted state, Tang manipulated the opponent's spirit body threads. He wanted to fix this past. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 326, Sincerity. One after another, illusory, transparent black thin lines floated up from Alistair Tudor in the mirror. Tang, precisely manipulating these spirit body threads, was leisurely and quickly turning the opponent into a marionette. Alistair Tudor had lost. Yes, he had lost quite thoroughly. Alistair Tudor in the mirror raised his head and looked at Tang, who stood in a higher position. The place they were in previously suddenly changed. Tang still had a smile on his lips. While raising his hand to manipulate the spirit body threads in his hand, he also had enough time to chat idly with the Blood Emperor, to introduce his hobbies. I like to collect some special things. Don't worry, Your Majesty, even among my collection, you will definitely be quite special. What an interesting marionette. Although he had many mirror people marionettes, he had never really seen a sequence 0 mirror person marionette, except for the female Rosal the Great who would occasionally surprise him when he crossed mirrors. Alistair Tudor in the mirror, whose spirit's control over his body was completely disrupted, remained silent. He chose to influence the spirit body threads through the symbolism of his own existence, leading them to destruction. This symbolism itself could not be interfered with by the cryptic servant's grafting. However, every time a spirit body thread ignited an illusory flame and was burned away, new spirit body threads would appear in Tang's hand. For a cryptic servant, the destruction of spirit body threads only slowed down his marionette making speed to a very small extent and was not a significant obstacle. As Tang, who had completely digested the cryptic servant potion and was also the strongest puppeteer, at present, he was adept at quickly turning others into marionettes. More and more spirit body threads emerged, becoming denser and denser. Tang's marionette-making operation was nearing its end. During this process, Nicola, who was once again behind Alistair Tudor in the mirror, pressed down on his black silk top hat. Whenever Alistair Tudor tried to interrupt the marionette-making process, Nicola, as an error, would disrupt the cryptic servants, grafting, process again by stealing and creating errors, thereby reducing the possibility of Alistair Tudor in the mirror struggling during the marionette-making process. As long as this, past, was fixed, Tang would be able to directly control Alistair Tudor's spirit, which was submerged in the eternal dark river, giving him direct control over the Blood Emperor in the future. This would be the best development. So, compared to dealing with the original witch, this Blood Emperor, who is extreme and lacks Beyonder characteristics to support him, is really too easy to deal with. Tang rested one hand on his chin, while the other hand was rapidly turning Alistair Tudor into a marionette through spirit-body threads. He even found time to look at the situation outside. How great it would be if his enemies in the future were all at this level. He wouldn't have to be so tired. Let him see. The hermit was still dragging Salinger and the original magic woman Chi-Kei in Euclidean space. The constantly appearing fate in the passage of time was the biggest enemy of these two gods. In a situation where they could be hanged in the long river of fate if not handled properly, the original witch also discovered that this memory had a problem. She wanted to enter and use the original witch's authority to destroy the projection of the Supreme Being, but she was stopped by the hermit. Although it was only a historical void image, with the endorsement of the knowledge wilderness, the double buff of the Supreme Being and the knowledge wilderness was enough for the hermit to drag on for a while longer. He might not be able to win, but for stalling, the best thing about historical void images was that even if they died, a new one could be immediately pulled out. It was a seamless romance, unique to the seer pathway. Tang glanced again at his remaining time and the time required for the marionette making. It seems that before the integration of Euclidean space and the eternal dark river ends, I should still be able to do something. Tang suddenly paused, seeming to sense something, and murmured, "It's better not to make such quick promises in the future." He raised his head and looked at the original magic woman Chi-Kei, who walked out of the sky, wearing a black bone skirt, identical to the one being held back by the hermit, and exquisitely beautiful. Tang narrowed his eyes, staring at the Chi-Kei in the black bone skirt. Nicola heard Tang's voice, understood, and extended his long, fair hand. With his back to Alistair Tudor in the mirror, he gripped the opponent's neck. Tang gave up on turning this, past, of the mirror-red priest into a marionette and chose to try to clear out his, past. His fingers touched the back of Alistair Tudor's neck. Nicola wanted to exert force directly and crush the opponent's neck, but unknowingly, a chilling sensation also came from his own neck. The time worms behind Nicola relayed information back to him. A long, fair hand, seemingly the sum of all beauty in the world, had silently gripped his neck. Tang's gaze fell on the original magic woman Chi-Kei, who had appeared behind Nicola at some unknown point. He sighed helplessly. It seemed his idea was going to fall through. With this thing present, hanging the Blood Emperor as a marionette would be quite a waste of time. However, the goal was achieved. Understanding Salinger's situation and what kind of trouble the original witch and the Blood Emperor caused in the Fourth Epoch could be considered quite fruitful. The traces of his existence rapidly disintegrated under the gaze of this inexplicably appearing, original magic woman Chi-Kei. Just as Nicola was about to act, his neck, gripped by the original magic woman Chi-Kei, twisted slightly. His body seemed to turn to stone, and along with the time worms and all historical void images, everything disintegrated completely. This historical void image belonging to Nicola Flamel, the Angel King, was completely shattered and did not return to the historical mist, but truly disappeared into the long river of history. However, this would not have much impact on Tang and Nicola. If the historical void image at this point in time was destroyed, they could just switch to the historical void image at the next point in time. Living long enough always provided a little room for error. Alistair Tudor in the mirror, who had almost been turned into a marionette, stood up somewhat unsteadily. He looked at Chi-Kei in the black bone skirt, a twisted and overly mad smile appearing on his face. "You really came. Inside Euclidean space. Time is almost up." "Tang, who had no intention of clashing with that thing in the deepest part of the mirror world, quickly inserted himself into the battle between the Hermit and Nether Emperor Salinger and original magic woman Khoi. Not turning Alistair Tudor into a marionette before leaving was, to be honest, a bit disappointing. So, he would compensate with something else. Tang stood not far from the true battleground of the gods. He took a step and entered the battlefield directly. He appeared in his true form between the two enemies. This time, he didn't hide anything, standing openly and grandly. Just as Nether Emperor Salinger and original magic woman Khoi looked over at this suddenly appearing, Sequence 0, Tang smiled and said to them, "Before we part, I think I have a responsibility to show you my sincerity." With that, before Nether Emperor Salinger and original magic woman Khoi could react, his figure rapidly twisted, and brilliant light enveloped his entire body, making him expand and grow. Those were fragments of light forming his body, and those were fragments symbolizing the fate of the future. A giant, ancient tree, seemingly connecting the past, present, and future, rapidly filled the eyes of original Witch and Salinger. 5 seconds left. Euclidean space began to tremble violently. Time and space were about to return to their normal operating nodes. 4 seconds. Tang transformed into a torrent named Future. 3 seconds. Nether Emperor Salinger's eyes widened. He stretched out his hand, and the power of death and madness poured out, trying to kill this Future. 2 seconds. Original magic woman Khoi's lips curved upwards, and she whispered softly. 1 second. So, that's how it is. Time corrected itself, and Nether Emperor Salinger and original magic woman Khoi were expelled by Euclidean space. Tang returned to his original, normal time point. Fifth Epoch, deep within the violent sea. As one spirit worm after another crawled out of the historical mist, bringing 3 portions of cryptic servant Beander characteristics back to the real world, Tang also revived once again with the miracle of the miracle workers, resurrection from the dead. As the price for returning to the past, Tang consumed one of his, resurrection from the dead, miracles. However, this didn't matter. The observer could allow him to return to a time point where he hadn't consumed the, resurrection from the dead, miracle. Even if not, he could always regress to sequence 2, then promote to sequence 1 again, using a bug to refresh his status. He was very familiar with this. It's just that he didn't know if his final contamination succeeded or failed. Tang's eyes, not yet fully formed from countless spirit worms, darted around, and then he saw the countless undead spirits and corpses floating on the sea surface, stretching for an unknown distance. Tang. This. Once the miracle worker's miracle completely reintegrated him with the cryptic servant Beander characteristics, and he was complete and without major issues. Tang then carefully surveyed his surroundings. These were all undead that had floated up from the seabed, undead that would immediately revive upon being killed. Tang glanced at the spears and swords impaled in these undead. These items had pinned all the undead that could continuously revive over the years, preventing their death imprints from returning. Aside from hanging up these undead, which would continuously revive due to their death imprints, and turning them into marionettes, this was also a unique solution. Owen's doing. Just then, the system slowly said, host, your brother looks a bit dead. Tang's expression became subtle. It can't be that bad, can it? He remembered bestowing Owen with part of the observer's Beander abilities. As long as his mental or life points dropped below the defense line, his status should reset immediately. Although things here looked a bit troublesome, Owen was still a Sequence 1 Pale Emperor. Affected by Salinger's will, Tang looked at the surface of the violent sea, which could be described as having millions of corpses. His trip to the past was only half an hour, yet it caused such a tragic scene. Indeed, promotion not only brings stronger abilities but also a process of getting closer to the Creator and those great existences. Salinger was indeed not being honest. Nailing down the coffin lid was indeed urgent. Euclidean space had completely encompassed the third layer of the violent sea. Through observation, Tang quickly found Owen's location. That area was still surrounded by an endless stream of undead emerging from the seabed. They were in the seabed and on the surface of the sea. Everywhere were living undead, or undead pinned in place with their death imprints fixed. These undead wailed, clawed, enraged, unable to return to the end of death, forcing them to fight eternally for the Emperor, heedless of their own lives. Owen stood alone amidst the undead army, surrounded by what seemed like an infinite number of undead, trying to drag him into the seabed and drown him in the eternal dark river at the bottom of the sea. Owen. Tang appeared in front of Owen. When Owen saw Tang, his face, covered in minced flesh and remnants, froze for a moment. The cold, emotionless, emperor-like feeling in his eyes, as if looking down on all living beings, rapidly receded. When Tang saw Owen, he quickly used the observer's authority to reverse Owen's state to the observation point previously recorded with him. For an observer, losing control is not an easy matter. An observer is similar to an audience. They can continuously recall their own state by observing a certain good state from their past, thereby ensuring their own stability and not easily losing control. And although Owen is a meander of the death pathway, the bestowed power will cause the recipient to continuously transform in the direction of the bestower due to the difference between the recipient and the bestower. However, as a cryptic servant, Tang could also create a marionette using Owen's normal, mental state as a template, and let the marionette perform the act of bestowing. In that case, being bestowed would instead help the other party's mental state become stable. With layers of subcontracted bestowals, as long as Tang could bear it, he could completely customize a dedicated, observer, save point for all deities, helping them stabilize their humanity and use this state to resist the initial revival. Tang. Owen looked at Tang, then at his surroundings, and moved his lips. No major issues. Just a slight influence from being too close to the mausoleum. Once I adapt, there won't be any problems. Tang checked Owen's mental state thoroughly, and after finding no issues, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, you won't easily lose control and go mad before I truly die." He glanced at the undead still emerging from below, walked over to Owen, and grabbed his shoulder. "Let's go, we'll enter the mausoleum directly." After his explosion in the past, who knew what changes would occur? Chapter 327, The Fated One. There were 3 layers of protection surrounding the periphery of the Nether Emperor Salinger's mausoleum in the Violent Sea. The first originated from a branch of the eternal dark river at the bottom of the sea. This branch was filled with the death imprints of the people who had once pledged allegiance to the Nether Emperor Salinger. These undead, who had died countless years ago, repeatedly pledged their loyalty to their emperor in an endless cycle of life and death, launching indiscriminate attacks on any tomb raiders who trespassed into the mausoleum's vicinity. The second was influenced by the death authority, creating a kill distance that kept the inverted pyramid mausoleum perpetually on an unreachable other shore. The first and second, in combination, meant that unless a high-sequence meander of the door pathway cooperated, even a sequence pathway like the eternal blazing sun, which naturally countered the undead, could potentially perish on the surface of the violent sea, turning into a wisp of vengeful spirit loyal to the emperor. As for the third, after passing through the first and second, upon reaching the exterior of the inverted pyramid mausoleum, the invaders would face the pyramid itself. Tang, with Owen, bypassed the first and second layers directly through Euclidean space, arriving at the distant region of the kill distance. Euclidean space had already merged with this place, so these obstacles couldn't stop him. Away from the sea surface covered with undead and the scattered flesh and corpse fragments that Owen had nailed in place, Tang and Owen soon saw the inverted pyramid mausoleum, which looked tiny from afar but revealed its immense scale only upon closer approach. The colossal inverted pyramid extended downwards from the sky as its base, shrinking layer by layer. Its dark gold bricks emitted a faint glow beneath the dark, lightless sky. This glow didn't bring a sense of security, instead, it gave off an eerie, terrifying feeling, as if the blood of those who had died unjustly had stained the stone bricks before their demise, and in the lightless environment, they were roaring in anger at everyone, narrating their grievances. Next, we're truly stepping into the arrangements of Death Salinger, if you feel uncomfortable, I'll send you out. To be honest, Tang wasn't too keen on bringing Owen along on this trip. He wasn't a Beyander of the death pathway, so even though entering this area symbolically made him a sacrifice, even if Salinger tried to resurrect through their bloodline connection, Salinger would only end up like Zun Zunbao, receiving 2 resounding slaps, with no other possibility. Even Zun Zunbao had to honestly endure the transmigrators' slaps, let alone Death Salinger, who wasn't even from an adjacent pathway. If he intended to act superior due to his age, then Tang would surely make a scene. But Owen was different. The suppression of the death pathway's higher sequences on lower ones was too severe. The closer he got to the death pathway's uniqueness, the greater the impact Owen, as a sequence 1 Pale Emperor, would suffer. But it was fine. If he wanted to come, he could. A sequence 1 Pale Emperor was a considerably powerful angel after all. He wouldn't die that easily or be possessed by Salinger. Besides, he was there. He had easily handled the dual pathway Salinger before. Could a deceased Salinger still snatch someone right in front of him? If he had that ability, he would have won against the 7 deities during the Pale disaster. It's fine. I'll tell you if I can't bear it. Owen scratched the back of his head and said. Okay, fine. If you can bear it, then there's no problem. Tang nodded, looking at the top of the inverted pyramid, which was its lowest, pointed section. Let's dismantle it layer by layer. Although reaching the top directly isn't impossible. However, he could also collect some Beyander characteristics and interesting items along the way, as this was Salinger's mausoleum, and there certainly wouldn't be a shortage of good things inside. Tang didn't use Euclidean space to check what those good things were beforehand. After all, one always had to enjoy the process of opening a blind box, didn't they? All right. Owen nodded. Tang manipulated the space-time in front of him. The pyramid's surface, which had been enchanted with some Beyander power to repel outsiders, rippled slightly. The dark gold stone bricks, emanating an ominous and deathly aura, were silently swallowed by some brilliant entities, opening a portal of light before Tang and Owen. For the actual manipulator of Euclidean space, the constant transformation between dimensions made Tang equivalent to a high-ranking individual of the door pathway. Tang walked in first, with Owen following closely behind. Upon entering the pyramid mausoleum, the first thing that came into view was a spiral staircase leading upwards. There were no lights in the mausoleum. Tang took out 2 lanterns from the historical mist and gave one to Owen. The bricks here also emitted an uncomfortable reflection under the lamplight. The 2 walked upwards for about 20 to 30 meters, after which the scene that greeted them suddenly expanded significantly. Looks like a burial chamber. This was a massive tomb chamber, filled with many neatly arranged coffins. The coffins bore the national emblem of the Baron Empire and feathered serpent decorations. The surrounding walls were carved with many exquisite murals. A quick glance suggested they depicted the greatness of the Baron Empire, the Nether Emperor Salinger, and the flourishing prosperity of the entire nation, among other things. There also seemed to be many burial objects here, most of which appeared to be high-grade sealed artifacts. According to the Fourth Epoch Baron Empire's burial customs, this level of arrangement indicates that the people buried here held significant status. And during that period, the middle and high ranks of the Baron Empire were mainly held by middle and high sequence Beyonders of the death pathway. Tang stood outside a certain boundary, not easily stepping into this seemingly lifeless tomb chamber. Despite its harmless appearance, in reality, the corpses in those coffins should be alive. Owen glanced at the coffins and said to Tang, "Very normal. For death, death is never the end of life. The states of living and dead were always relative." After examining the corpses in the coffins, Tang saw many that were already somewhat decayed, with oily yellow feathers growing from the decayed parts. Many of these corpses still had power flowing through them, brought by Beyander characteristics. Highest at sequence 4, meaning undying. There are 2 of those. The rest are all mid-sequence, with no low sequence. Demigods only deserve to lie in the outermost coffins. As for the sealed artifacts here, well, there were a few Beyander items at the sequence 4 level. After completing the most basic intelligence gathering, Tang took a step forward. As he crossed a certain boundary, one by one, the corpses, decayed, semi-decayed, and those already grown feathers, either opened their eyelids or their eyeballs shifted, all looking in Tang's direction. There was a bloodline connection, but they were not beyonders of the death pathway. However, before they could react, their bodies suddenly crashed through the coffin lids on their own, and lines of spirit body threads flipped, rapidly pulling them up to the ceiling of the tomb chamber. The corpses tried to struggle, but their struggles quickly diminished. The rapid marionettization of a cryptic servant who had finished digesting his potion was something these low-level corpses could not resist. So, not long after, these corpses, constantly growing feathers, eventually turned into air-dried jerky hanging from the ceiling, swaying back and forth. Standing aloof from the world, ascending to immortality. Tang looked at the feathers, covered in yellow grease, floating down from the corpses, and shook his head. Normally, shouldn't the feathers of a death pathway Beander in their mythical creature form be white? These were all corrupted. After quickly marionettizing and disposing of these small fry, Tang snapped his fingers. The newly made marionettes, hanging there, trembled a few times, and then, clusters of light separated from their chests, sliding down into the palm of Tang's other hand, the one not holding the lantern. Beander characteristics at the demigod level were better than nothing. After retrieving the Beander characteristics, Tang also conveniently collected the accompanying Beander items, then continued walking towards the staircase at the end of the tomb chamber, preparing to descend to the next level. Owen looked at the swaying marionettes, hanging in midair, rapidly dying due to the power of the entire mausoleum after losing their Beander characteristics, then looked at Tang, who was already preparing to go to the next level, and shook his head with some pity. "You all, take care of yourselves." With that thought, Owen also walked forward. "A locust plague passing through, nothing more. I feel like you're scolding me." "No." Owen shook his head rapidly. "I also saw some strange scenes in the future. Intis Republic, capital, Trier." Tang, a historical void image, pulled out of the historical mist by Nicola, propped his chin, idly surveying his surroundings. This was the area of Trier equivalent to Backland's East Borough, which was the slum. Most of the people living here were from low-income, financially struggling families with poor conditions, and it was also the dwelling place for many who had no opportunity or ability and could only become vagrants. Of course, with the assistance of the eternal blazing sun, the god of craftsmen, the Intis government, and Miskatonic, during the period when the minimum living standards system was in effect in Intis, while one might not live very well, it was not that easy to die. Is it related to the fourth pillar? Nicola's light brown eyes flickered slightly as he quietly asked. As you know, the fourth pillar requires the uniqueness and one portion of Beander characteristics from both the 2 calamity pathways and the 3 eternal pathways, meaning 5 pathways in total, to become the fourth pillar. Tang waved his hand. Although we still don't know if the formation of this fourth pillar only requires collecting and gathering the symbols to advance, or if it needs a specific ritual and a special timing to complete, in my expectation, this can only be used as a last resort threat. That is, to scare people when negotiating with those old entities, with the belief of dragging all the old ones and pillars into a game over. He temporarily had no intention of letting this world end together. No one wants the fourth pillar to be born. We don't want it, and the fallen mother goddess and the desire mother tree certainly don't want it. But I said before, when I finished digesting the cryptic servant potion, that I had a dream that should be related to the birth of the fourth pillar. Nicola, you still remember, right? I remember vividly, Tang. Nicola leaned against a wall covered in unknown plants, looking at the crowds occasionally passing by outside the alley. My avatars and marionettes are already spread throughout the Trier region. Bringing this up suddenly here is because of that fated person I saw before. Sequence 8 of the Supreme Being Pathway, the potion name, fated person, can also be called protagonist. Everyone is the protagonist of their life, from a small event to a grand era. Everyone is enacting a story with themselves as the protagonist. Beyonders of this sequence can use the power of spirituality to drive the development of events, designating someone as the protagonist of a certain event, thereby advancing the plot and gaining extraordinary good luck and fortuitous encounters. After all, the existence of a protagonist halo always has a touch of predestination. Of course, the fated person that Nicola and Tang are currently talking about is not the name of the Sequence 8 potion of the Supreme Being pathway. This fated person refers to the protagonist in the book, Lord of the Mysteries, which is the protagonist of the current era. Klein Moretti. But on other people, I felt the sensation of a fated person that was not under my control. I had only seen this before on Dao Dao and Klee Cat. They are not graced ones, so there's probably only one possibility. Logically, the existence of a fated person is either because they are influenced by the novel, Lord of the Mysteries, thus the traces left on the Supreme Being automatically evolve into a person with a natural, fated person, aura, or Tang has bestowed the corresponding pathway sequence. Basically, there are no wild, fated persons. Tang said slowly. That is, the protagonist of the next era. Nicola's gaze fell on a little boy who suddenly turned into this alley, looking a bit disheveled. When I was dealing with Salinger and Kike, I used the authority of the Supreme Being to look at the original witch's future. Tang smiled. Don't you think it's interesting? In a certain possibility in the future, I saw the outcome where both Kike and Alistair Tudor were eaten, and this has a strong connection to the birth of the fourth pillar. It was as if someone, at some moment in the future, had fused Kike and Alistair Tudor. A spiritual, physical, bodily, emotional, and spiritual patchwork monster. And it feels like the existence of this possibility, just like what I saw on Trish Chick, carries a sense of destiny that makes one unable to resist, both disgusted and craving, wanting to take a bite. The little boy got closer and closer to Nicola. He looked warily at Nicola, who was leaning against the wall, tightened his grip on the bag he was holding, and, looking disheveled, prepared to bypass this strange adult. And behind him, "Don't run, you little brat." Chapter 328, A Follower, 200 Firkin. Nicola leaned closer to the wall behind him, allowing the young boy, who had heard the angry roar behind him and was quickly running from one end of the alley to the other with his head down, to rush past him. "Don't run, you little bastard. When I catch you, I'll stuff your XXX into your mom's 4X. You son of a bitch. Give me back my stuff. Stop." Tang. Wow, that's some foul language. Tang sat on the rooftop beside the alley, watching the boy twist and turn. He was clearly familiar with the area and quickly escaped from the guys who had been chasing him all along. Tang glanced in Nicola's direction. Nicola understood, and their figures quickly vanished from their spots. Compared to ordinary people who crashed through the alley like headless flies, as a genuine angel, this kind of terrain had no impact on them. Therefore, catching up to the thief, who was also within the scope of ordinary people, was not difficult for Nicola and Tang. The boy, having just escaped his pursuers, let out a sigh of relief when he suddenly heard light, rhythmic footsteps behind him. The boy suddenly turned around. He saw a man wearing a black silk top hat and a matching swallowtail coat, looking completely out of place in the dark, cramped alley. Servants of those officials. Was it a coincidence? The boy wondered. He seemed to have seen this person just now, but how did this person appear here? Following him, catching up. The boy glanced at the man's attire and thought it shouldn't be suitable for fast running. So, did he just happen to walk to this place? A shortcut? Or was he just wearing similar clothes, and he had run so fast that he only saw a general outline and couldn't be sure if it was the person standing in front of him now? Nicola adjusted his black silk top hat. His light brown eyes glanced at the item hidden in the boy's hand. As an angel king of the thief pathway, finding stolen goods and assessing their value was not difficult. What the boy stole seemed to be some common medication for illnesses, which wasn't valuable in Trier, Intis. But judging from the reactions of the people chasing him, it didn't seem like this was the first time he had done such a thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't make such a big fuss over such a small thing. Nicola walked closer to the boy, who cautiously took 2 steps back, then turned and tried to run. He always felt that this strange, suddenly appearing person had ill intentions, and it was better to leave early. It must be said, his feeling was correct. But for a young beast about to escape, there are always some lures that can make it hesitate. He quickly stopped his steps. I have a deal here. Do you want to do it? Nicola quickly learned the boy's general information through information exchange with his other avatars and marionettes. He quickly threw out the bait. This person is really short on money. The young man's voice behind him was a bit low, but it still flowed smoothly into the boy's ears through the somewhat dark and cramped alley. A deal. The boy paused, quickly realizing something. This person might have some bad intentions, but were these intentions not directed at him? Or, was this an opportunity for him to make some quick money? After all, no matter how dark Trier was, both the top-level big shots and the bottom-level commoners could more or less feel it. It was very common for some unsavory things to be handed over to homeless people whose lives weren't important. Yes. Nicola smiled and nodded. 100 Firkin, how about it? Tang, you're really a bit stingy. None of your business. I was very generous by not charging for the historical void image, alright. According to the current inflation rate, it was roughly equivalent to 4 gold pounds in ruin. Although for a Beander, 4 gold pounds could do nothing but buy spiritual materials and auxiliary potion ingredients, for those of a low sequence, or those who weren't Beyonders at all, just people at the bottom, 100 Firkin was enough to do many things. What kind of deal is it? The boy vigilantly looked around Nicola. He didn't find any strange people, and this guy didn't look like he could fight very well. Therefore, relying on his experience, the boy reluctantly asked, feeling that the situation was negotiable. The boy must have lived well before. Although he wore simple clothes, the accent of some Intis words showed that his former upbringing was quite good. It was just unknown why he had fallen so far, even needing to resort to theft here. A very simple deal. I can give you the deposit now, 40 Firkin, how about it? The remaining 60 Firkin will be given after you complete the task I assign. After confirming the combat strength of himself and his opponent, the boy thought for a moment and decided that even if he was unlucky and this person was a human trafficker who just wanted to abduct him, he could still escape by relying on his familiarity with the area. Only then did he slowly nod. With this kind of unsuitable, only burdensome attire in this place, it was good, the advantage was his. Okay. Nicola heard the other party agree and showed his usual smile. Like a magician, his white-gloved hand grabbed at the void, then produced a gold coin marked with 40 Firkin. Under the boy's gaze, Nicola's other free hand pulled out a note from the void. He clipped the Firkin into the note and tossed it to the boy, who was clearly still wary of him. The boy was very agile. While protecting the item in his hand, he caught the note and Firkin that Nicola threw. After confirming that the Firkin was real, the boy slowly opened the note in his hand and saw its contents. They were sentences formed by some Intis words. Although the boy was not illiterate, he was indeed unsure about the pronunciation and meaning of the unfamiliar Intis words written on the note. This is. After scanning a few times, the boy saw that the strange man did not approach, exhaled, and did not force himself. He honestly said to his employer, I can't read what's written on it. It doesn't matter. Nicola clapped his hands and smiled, I can teach you. These are all very simple words. Is this person all right? The boy looked at the young man in front of him as if looking at an idiot, and after thinking that this person might not be very smart, he casually said, can't you just tell me what your deal is? Why be so troublesome? I can. Nicola said briskly, as for our transaction, what you need to do is as simple as I said before, you just need to read what's written on the note I gave you. That's all. After you finish reading, I'll give you the remaining 60 falcon. That's simple. The young man was a bit incredulous. Yes, that's simple, Nicola said. The young man repeated it again, as if to confirm, and after getting Nicola's affirmation, he really looked at Nicola as if he were an idiot. Isn't this a big spender? As for whether there would be any problems with it, In Trier, which was under the strict supervision of the eternal blazing sun and the artisan church, the actual danger of reading such unfamiliar things was something everyone knew full well. But he was short on money, and he felt he could give it a try. After all, how could there be evil gods or monsters in this world? It was all just for fun. Nicola chuckled, not caring about the other party's strange gaze. All right. Although the young man still felt a bit strange, he scanned his surroundings, confirmed that he still had the advantage, and then exhaled, saying, "How do I read these? Although it's written in Intis language, we need to use Ancient Hermes," Nicola said. "But I suppose you don't know what Ancient Hermes is. It doesn't matter, just follow me and read." With that, Nicola opened his mouth and spoke the first sentence. "Great Ring of Destiny. What is this nonsense?" The young man frowned, just about to say that he didn't quite understand and it was hard to remember it all at once, and if he could repeat it, his mouth suddenly moved on its own. Invisible, transparent time worms with 12 segments floated around the young man, burrowing into his mouth and nose, and into his spiritual body in a way that would be horrifying to an outsider. The sequence 4 of the thief pathway, the potion name is Parasite. Through deep-level parasitism, a parasite can naturally control the host's limbs, thoughts, and spirit, manipulating the other party's body and allowing them to quickly learn a language in a short time. For the most top-tier parasites, this is not a difficult task. Great Ring of Destiny. The young man listened in astonishment to the words he spoke, which were identical to those of the young man in front of him. He felt a power that didn't belong to him, seemingly controlling him. He wanted to run, but unfortunately, he could no longer control his body. "You are the past, you are the present, you are the future." Nicola didn't seem surprised by the young man's actions. He continued to speak the next words. "You are the past, you are the present, you are the future. You are the cause, you are the result, and you are the process. You are the cause, you are the result, and you are the process. I request your grace. I request your grace. I request your grace, the power of a dancer. I request your grace." At this point, Nicola and Tang, who had appeared beside him, looked towards the sky. Another historical void image of Tang, located in the astral world, sat in a Gothic palace filled with night jasmine and deep sleep flowers, suddenly looked up at the barrier in the astral world that separated the inside from the outside. A female figure beside him, whose face seemed veiled by a thin gauze, making her features indistinct, looked in the same direction as Tang. What happened? Tang's eyes shimmered with a brilliant luster. His gaze pierced through the barrier, seeing a ring existing in a very distant direction beyond the barrier. No movement. Is it because the barrier's power is still active? Nothing. I met an interesting fellow over in Intis. With a slight shift in his gaze, Tang smiled, not elaborating. The Black Knight goddess also didn't seem to intend to delve deeper into it, and the two fell silent again. It really doesn't seem to be moving. Tang, who was in Trier, received feedback from his other historical void images and clicked his tongue. I wonder if the Ring of Destiny is holding back a big move, or if it truly doesn't care. It sent a tryst chick in, and it can still remain so calm. Who knows what kind of trick it's up to now. Nicola glanced at Tang's historical void image beside him, then focused his gaze on the young man who, after saying that long passage, recoiled in horror, having regained control of his body, no longer caring about the remaining falcon, and was attempting to escape. How should we handle this? Although I really want to say, let's just take care of him here and now, it could avoid a lot of trouble in the future. Tang shrugged, but that would probably disrupt the main body's arrangements. Just have him recite your honorific name, and monitor him with a time worm. Add some marionettes and your clones around him too. If something goes wrong, or if he gets out of our control. He gave a perfectly appropriate smile to the young man, who had suddenly fallen hard to the ground and was unable to move due to the time worm's parasitism. Then we'll just hang him up and make him a marionette. I believe the main body would be very happy to get a marionette that might become a calamity of destruction in the future. Although the young man didn't understand the conversation between Tang and Nicola, He could feel a strong killing intent from the young man who had appeared out of nowhere. Would he die here? Nicola shifted his gaze, sighing, "Are you still a child, Tang? Scaring a child like this, you'll get your comeuppance. Oh, come on." As a cryptic servant, the emphasis is on cryptic, isn't it? Scaring people is also a manifestation of cryptic, Tang said. Tang withdrew his gaze, resting his chin on one hand. "I didn't see anything. Due to the fated person, I can't see some high-level futures. I'll leave the rest to you. I'm off work now." After saying this, Tang's historical void image disappeared, returning to the historical mist. Nicola, left to clean up, sighed helplessly again when he saw Tang leave. Then, he looked at the young man, who was frozen in place and unable to move, and asked gently, "All right, this transaction is complete. However, I think I have one more thing for you to do." It's also 100 Falcon, how about it? If you don't say anything, I'll take it as your consent." With that, Nicola smiled and began. "Then please recite in ancient Hermes again. All incorrect errors. The embodiment of fallacies and loopholes. The hour hand that guides destiny. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask just now. Are you interested in becoming my dear? When I have time, I'll go take a look myself." Holding the lantern, Tang, who was about to reach the top floor of the mausoleum, paused. He glanced at the gray ceiling above, where no stars could be seen. After receiving the information from his historical void image, he pondered for a moment and quickly understood the issue. The high-dimensional overseer and the Ring of Destiny, to infiltrate power while the barrier is still intact, sending an anomaly like Triss in should already be the limit. Doing anything more would only hinder things and easily lead to unforeseen changes. If merely chanting the command would evoke a response, then Tang felt he could completely set up a ritual in some place in outer space, gather helpers, chant the command, and when the Ring of Destiny responded, directly use that connection to link his future self with the Ring of Destiny. Even if he couldn't kill the Ring of Destiny, he could at least cause it a lot of trouble. Since they were adjacent pathways, it was naturally a matter of being as ruthless and disgusting as possible. So it seems this child, although a fated one, meaning the protagonist of the next era, the time hasn't arrived yet, and the Ring of Destiny won't interfere. Things had returned to square one. What was the true meaning of Triss existence? Was it simply that the high-dimensional overseer and the Ring of Destiny had made a big mess? Amidst his swirling thoughts, Tang placed the extraordinary characteristic, which had just drifted from the River of Death and belonged to the former Death Consul of the Baron Empire, into his system space. He then looked at the last great door in the mausoleum. This was the final checkpoint. Currently, all the monsters in the entire mausoleum, some hanged, some turned into extraordinary characteristics, and others dismantled or killed by him and Owen, had been purified and cleansed with the fate of a supreme being. Regardless of whether they were good or bad, living or dead, real or fake, almost everything left behind had been transformed into Tang's likeness. It was perfect, the kind one could directly lie down in. And this was the last room. It was also the core part of the entire mausoleum. "I'll go in first. You can enter after I've gained control. Don't underestimate the influence of this pathway's uniqueness, especially when there are still some small troubles left by the previous death god." After speaking, Tang reached out and touched the stone door, intricately carved with beautiful patterns, in front of him. He transformed himself into an unobservable state, passed through the door's final defense line, and entered. The world inside the door was similar to the scene Tang had seen over 1,000 years ago through Euclidean space, in the future, that contained half of Azik Eggers' soul and the death pathway's uniqueness. A colossal, terrifying usurpant, like a small island, coiled in the center of the vast room, surrounded by bleached bones, death, and an aura of decay. It was as if it had encountered the ultimate death, where even death and time would decay and rot in the long expanse of eternity. If Tang himself hadn't been in an unobservable state, the first thing to greet him would certainly not have been a welcoming ceremony, but rather suffocating spiritual energy, condensed from death, trying to make him forever sleep there. Tang transitioned his state from unobservable to observable. Simultaneously, he re-linked the death aura that approached him, making it a cycle instead of idly pouncing on him. After dealing with these, Tang then carefully observed the colossal usurpant. Tisk tisk, it's a stitched monster too. And this crude, shoddy method of forcefully stitching a general spirit body and a uniqueness together appeared quite ridiculous in Tang's eyes. Ah, truly. Tang met the gaze of the usurpant, which seemed to have sensed something, its island-like massive head suddenly rising. As he met its colossal vertical pupils, the outpouring madness in its eyes seemed to infect Tang as well. The usurpant did nothing, yet Tang felt something within him begin to awaken. It was a faint spiritual imprint from the Eggers family, from the depths of the bloodline, left by Nether Emperor Salinger, the true god of the death pathway. And now, this imprint was rapidly reviving within the intruder's body, using the uniqueness of the death pathway and the bloodline connection, attempting to seize control of the spirit of the person who entered the mausoleum, to fully awaken from their body, and achieve the great miracle of resurrection from the dead. Tang lowered his eyelids, and large expanses of gray fog suddenly drifted from his body. That was the aura of the Source Castle. When the colossal usurpant saw the vast expanses of gray fog, it seemed to sense a threat. Its island-like massive body coiled up, attempting to entangle the stagnant spiritual energy of death around it with the continuously spreading gray fog, to kill it. But unfortunately, they were not on the same level. Tang extended his hand. He grasped the spirit body threads of this colossal usurpant. Savoring the sensation of controlling this stitched monster as the strongest marionettist, Tang couldn't help but think. Ah, indeed, a stitched monster is just a stitched monster. Even its spirit body threads are all over the place, one here, one there, completely haphazardly connected. A spiritual stitching naturally has a spiritual decomposition. Although Salinger is an expert in manipulating spirits, from a high-dimensional perspective, this decomposition and restitching are equally flawed and shoddy. As the gray fog continuously spread from Tang into this space, a phantom river, seemingly endless, where even death would drown, and appearing to contain all colors, faintly emerged beneath the usurpant and Tang. Vaguely, a colossal figure could be seen lingering by the river, unable to come ashore. But soon, this faintly visible river was covered by thin, delicate layers of gray fog, obscuring it and causing it to fall silent once more. Spirit body threads continuously flew out from the colossal usurpant's limbs and bones, caught by the cryptic servant. It seems every part of your spirit wants independence, and every piece of your flesh wants to break free from your main body. The gray fog coiled around the colossal usurpant's trunk. Mr. Error, situated above the Source Castle, cast his gaze. Using the characteristics of the Source Castle, he strengthened the gray fog's suppression of the source material, preventing the colossal usurpant, born from certain hidden attempts, from receiving further assistance from a tributary flowing out of the eternal dark river from the west continent. At the same time, time worms continuously emerged from the mists of history. A small portion merged with the surroundings, while the majority burrowed into the colossal usurpant's spirit body, parasitizing it. The usurpant's massive body trembled. It wanted to make other movements, but very quickly, as the marionette transformation deepened, its already insane and irrational thoughts became increasingly sluggish, and its ability to manipulate its spirituality also slowed down little by little. It had to leave this cryptic servant. There was still a chance. Its sluggish thoughts seemed to briefly clear when it saw something beginning to grow within Tang's body. Tang, on the other hand, meticulously manipulated the marionette in his hand while looking inside his own body. He unhurriedly observed the will of Salinger beginning to emerge and awaken from his flesh and blood, from every spirit worm, and from his bloodline. This will had always been hidden within the bloodline, a strong symbolic connection in mysticism. All of Salinger's bloodline had the potential to bring Salinger back from death, but in this mausoleum within the violent sea, the possibility of his return was highest, the chance of resurrection greatest, and the likelihood of retaining his power best. After all, What Tang was currently facing was a monster formed by the uniqueness of a pathway fused with half of a death console. Driven by the massive usurpant's sluggish thoughts, the spirituality from the former death, Nether Emperor Salinger, that had awakened from the bloodline, began to erode from the physical to the spiritual, attempting to reconstruct a new will of Nether Emperor Salinger. Although this was not a sufficiently compatible vessel, Salinger, as a half-mad true god who had once contained the Red Priest pathway, there was essentially little fundamental difference between containing a Red Priest or a cryptic servant. Anyway, the ultimate outcome was madness. Tang observed everything happening within his body without intervening, leisurely playing with the spirit-body threads in his hand. So, calm. Why? The massive usurpant's insane and bewildered gaze fell upon Tang. Tang smiled slightly at the huge usurpant. You'll know in a bit. Soon, these wills came into contact with his spirit. Then, these fragments of Nether Emperor Salinger's awakened will began to uncontrollably go mad. He peered into the unpeopable, naturally falling into madness, his will boiling, burning, rapidly decaying, degenerating, and dissipating. A madness more terrifying than becoming a Red Priest descended upon Salinger's partially revived will. He went mad once again. Even a supreme being would get 2 slaps from me. You, this mere fragment that isn't even a Beander characteristic of the pathway itself, and just a will revived through bloodline connection, are truly not enough to even look at. Tang, who had long known the fated outcome, withdrew his gaze and continued to focus on the massive usurpant before him. However, if it's such a crudely made product, it can indeed cause me a bit of trouble. How to completely separate the uniqueness of the death pathway from his old grandpa's spirit without harming his old grandpa's half-soul, this was delicate work, and even as a sequence 1, he would need to spend a lot of time. He couldn't rely on historical void images for a long time, nor could he basically use other bestowed, observer, or cryptic servant, marionettes to do it. After all, whether it was historical void images or marionettes, the error in precise manipulation using Euclidean space was greater than his. If he was not careful and tore the wrong spirit body during the separation, or if the uniqueness fused with something it shouldn't have, who knew what kind of monstrous form it would become. Although I've set an observer blessing for old grandpa, so he won't become an old grandpa who knows nothing when the time comes, it would still be better for him to be in his original state with a complete spirit body. One spirit body thread after another floated in the air. As an angel king, facing the uniqueness of the death pathway, an uncontrollable massive usurpant that was almost equivalent to a zero-class sealed artifact, and not even one with a particularly high degree of activation, the method Tang chose was naturally much gentler. He would let every piece of flesh and every part of the spirit body separate and become his marionettes, using partial marionette abilities to gradually devour the massive usurpant, separate the uniqueness of the death pathway, strip away the spirit body, and throw Salinger's arrangement back to the bottom of the eternal dark river. After the initial control was completed, Tang pulled out a historical void image of himself to temporarily take his place. With his hands free, Tang turned and opened the door to the mausoleum. As the stone door, sealed for 1,000 years, slowly opened, Owen walked in from outside, his first sight being the massive usurpant. It's magnificent, isn't it? Tang turned his body and said with a smile, so, you should know why I absolutely had to press down Salinger's coffin lid. Looking at the usurpant with a face identical to his father's, Owen's expression was somewhat complex. I didn't expect him to be this mad, he said softly. He's just an old madman. Tang clapped his hands, making his historical void image disappear, and he himself resumed control of the marionette transformation. Although you've met in dreams, dreams have always been one of the best ways for these mad fellows to exert influence. As a sequence 1 of the death pathway, a great angel of this pathway, Owen was certainly the most severely affected by the former death, Salinger, especially with the added buff of the bloodline connection. This meant that Owen would always receive Salinger's trans-temporal calls, in situations of low mental fortitude, or in dreams, where problems easily arose, and where one could see things that shouldn't be seen or hear sounds that shouldn't be heard. Of course, Owen, being in an observer, state and a recipient of the blessing. In reality, every time Salinger came, Tang would give him a big slap. A dead half-old one and a living, transmigrator, naturally couldn't be compared in terms of their influence on others. This was also why he dared to let Owen walk here with confidence. And it seems that some of the arrangements I made earlier are having an effect. Tang turned to look at the massive U-serpent before him, which was under the dual suppression of time worms and marionette transformation, and further restrained by Source Castle, now essentially under control. Not long ago, if it were in the eyes of original Witch and Salinger, that would have been 1,000 years ago. While he showed these two deities a glimpse of the future, he also made them experience some rather friendly things. For example, the constant ravings within the Beander characteristics were not just the initial spiritual imprints, he had added a little something else. Chapter 330, Debts Don't Weigh You Down. Making Beyonders from non-adjacent pathways subject to your control, allowing your spiritual imprint to revive within them. Owen's face wore a, "Are you kidding me?" expression. For a Beander of a certain pathway, there are three sources that can influence them. Firstly, there is the spiritual imprint originating from within the Beander characteristic itself, from the demigod level, belonging to the previous Beander. Demigods are called demigods precisely because they have transcended the scope of normal beings, already being half or full mythical creatures. This allows their spiritual power to remain within their Beander characteristics, forming spiritual imprints, which can be either transient or long-lasting. Secondly, there is the influence originating from the god or high-ranking existence belonging to their own pathway. The higher the sequence of a pathway, the stronger the influence on that pathway. For example, Nicola, as an error, and Tang, as an angel king, both have the ability to adjust the Beander abilities of all sequences under their pathway, or directly make their voices echo in the ears of Beyonders of their pathway when they are advancing or when their sanity drops. Finally, and most importantly, there is the influence from the Creator. The Creator, in its early stages, conceived the fallen Mother Goddess and differentiated into multiple personalities such as the Primal God and Fu Sheng Zan Huang Tian Zun. Most Beander characteristics currently existing on this planet originate from the Creator, while a small portion comes from other old ones in the astral world. The Beander characteristics flowing within all Beyonders will uncontrollably carry a trace of the Creator's spiritual imprint. Beyonders of different sequences only differ in the strength of their spiritual imprint, while the spiritual imprints of different Beyonders have different affiliations. For example, the initial imprint for the three mystic pathways is Fu Sheng Zan Huang Tian Zun. For the 5 omniscient and omnipotent pathways and the 2 calamity pathways, it is the Primal God, and for the Moon and Mother pathways, it is the fallen Mother Goddess. This is similar to the first type, the spiritual imprint left behind by a Beander characteristic that was once possessed. However, the essential difference between the first and third types is that the spiritual imprints originating from the Creator are eternal. The imprints from old ones and pillars, even if the current Lord of the Mysteries God achieves a phased victory and overcomes the spiritual imprints present within the Beander characteristics, will inevitably lose to those old ones and former pillars over eternal time. As for what Tang said about his spiritual imprint reviving within them, unless Tang had once accommodated those Beander characteristics, or he is the Creator, otherwise. Owen paused. Soon, he thought of what had happened to himself. That's right, his and Tang's pathways are not adjacent, but so far, the common problem among high-ranking existences, the will of the Creator remaining within the Beander characteristics, is awakening quite slowly, or rather, it is being suppressed by something. He is a sequence 1 of the death pathway. The awakening will, besides the Creator, actually also includes the will of the former God of Death, Nether Emperor Salinger. But Owen couldn't help but look at Tang. Tang's previous explanation was that he could use the authority of a cryptic servant to balance the delicate connection between Fu Sheng Zan Huang Tian Zun, the Creator's will, and anchor points. Through the connection of bloodline, he could graft this connection over, interrupting the revival of the Creator's will within him and neutralizing the residual spiritual will of Salinger. Owen, who already didn't quite believe his younger brother's simple explanation, now grew even more suspicious. What he said about letting his spiritual imprint revive in others sounded like possession, giving him a feeling of sanity dropping. But where did you, a cryptic servant, learn such an ability? It can't be that mystic to this extent, can it? Why are you looking at me with that expression? I'm not crazy, nor have I been taken over by the Lord of the Mysteries. Tang wordlessly opened Owen's hand, which was preparing to pinch his face to confirm if his brother had been possessed by the Lord of the Mysteries, while simultaneously stabilizing the spirit threads of the gigantic usurpant nearby, which was attempting to struggle again. The number of spirit threads entwined in Tang's hand grew, and as more and more small, independent spirits and flesh became his marionettes, those spirits and flesh that had become his marionettes also gradually withered away with the surrounding escaping deathly aura. The spirit threads broke as a result, the marionettes died, and then were reawakened by the cryptic servant, who once again controlled the spirit threads, turning them into marionettes in his hand. This was delicate work, to be handled slowly. Ahem, in short, I buried something in Salinger and the original witch. These preset things, at the necessary moment, can become a mysticism bomb capable of blowing up an entire pathway, affecting Beyonders. The closer one is to a high-ranking existence, the closer to the sequence 0 position, the closer to the god of their affiliated pathway, the more they will be affected. Under the evolution of fate, and with the strong interference of Euclidean space and the Supreme Being, at that moment 1,000 years ago, Tang allowed the original witch and Salinger to glimpse the appearance of the future. The inevitable future, for Salinger and Kike, who were unaware at the time, was both a danger and an opportunity. The opportunity lay in their ability to see glimpses of the future and make arrangements in advance. Although the future would not change, it was still possible to seek a glimmer of hope in an unseen future. The danger, however, was that these futures were also a form of pollution, which would cause humans and gods to involuntarily become puppets of fate. After all, the future is not so easily glimpsed, and this would cause them to suffer the spiritual pollution of the Supreme Being, leading them to frequently see things they shouldn't and hear voices they shouldn't. This was the spiritual imprint Tang inserted into Salinger and the original witch by relying on the future. Based on the evolution method of mad knowledge, after he came into contact with these two gods, if all information about Tang and the images from the future were not dealt with, then this knowledge, which originates from the Supreme Being, and also from a sequence 0, aided by the knowledge wilderness, equivalent to a half-old one hermit, would cause them to be continuously assaulted by mad knowledge until death, driving the matter ones even madder and killing them faster. Ultimately, everyone will become puppets suspended beneath the long river of fate. This was a contingency plan Tang left for himself. Although it was an inevitable future, and the future influences the past, and the past influences the future, forming a complete loop, in reality, there is still a limit to how much the future can interfere with the past, and how it should interfere. For example, the issue with Amon, that's also something to be dealt with next. If his past self were to borrow power from his current self, and when he returned to the past, he directly slapped that Amon, along with the Amon who wasn't present at the time, to death, then this cycle would have a major problem, and he himself might have to die with it. Torn apart by the authority he wielded, embracing death in its true sense. If Salinger and the original witch, on the eve of the Pale Disaster, after being attacked by an unknown Old One and a sequence 0, had chosen to immediately target Tang through divination and prophecy, although the Tang from the future could not be affected, his past self might not have been. My past self, even if the time I transmigrated to was after the Pale Disaster, at that time, although Salinger was dead, the original witch was still alive. The mirror creator might not have lacked means to lock onto him and act against his past self. In just thinking about himself, who wasn't even a Beyonder, facing the original witch, that horrifying sight. This kind of paradox, it's quite terrifying to think about. So, knowing that they were suffering from mental pollution, they used the symbols of death and destruction to clear away information involving mad knowledge. This way, they would not be affected by the mad knowledge, but it would create gaps in this part of their memory. Any paper materials or divination results obtained from the spirit world would simultaneously be tainted with the color of mad knowledge, endlessly and unavoidable. And if they chose not to clear away the information of mad knowledge, they would have to constantly fight against it, leaving them no time to care for the past tang. Clear it away, forget it, don't clear it away, big trouble, no time to spare. This was a guarantee, and also a necessary self-protection measure during the period of influencing the past. As for the second contingency, it's aimed at the current Salinger. Tang looked at the usurpant in front of him. His hand, which was manipulating the spiritual body threads, paused, then he commanded the Euclidean space to descend part of its power onto the usurpant. The main body of this thing was half a soul and the uniqueness of the death pathway. Regardless of that half belonging to Azik Eggers' soul, the other part, the uniqueness of the death pathway, indeed belonged to the former Nether Emperor Salinger. And Salinger had seen the future once. Although with the passage of time, because the predetermined future node had already passed, the mental pollution from the future remaining within the body of this giant usurpant had weakened to a degree where it could no longer be perceived. Not even by Tang's main body, there were still usable aspects. After using the characteristics of the Supreme Being to bestow the giant usurpant with the power of an observer's grace, within the usurpant's body, beside the mental will of Nether Emperor Salinger within the death pathway uniqueness that belonged to Nether Emperor Salinger, a will that might have long since perished was slowly gaining new life. Although he thought Salinger should not have cleared away the mental pollution he left in her body after that, intending to use this mental pollution to contend with the will of the primal god and the Creator's revival, and stabilize her semi-mad state. But to be honest, Tang was still a little surprised to see that his will had not been cleared away. He was bold and astonished by the Nether Emperor Salinger, the true ruler of the former Baron Empire. After all, not everyone had the courage to introduce a mental imprint of unknown origin into their mental game with the primal god and the Creator. But speaking of which, the wills of mine that I inserted into Salinger and the original witch using the future, none of them were cleared away, were they? Although he hadn't sensed anything before, once Salinger was dead, her future had ended, so weak as to be negligible. Tang sensed it, good, nothing sensed. It should be because the original witch has always been hiding in a special mirror world. That place hides a mirror creator created by two madmen, Alistair Tudor and Kike, so it's normal for it to block his perception of his own will. The original witch using her own anchor points to balance the Creator, the primal god, and the awakening of his mental imprint, thereby stabilizing her humanity and seeking development. This was indeed a very reasonable development. By introducing a new variable between madness and even greater madness, it was indeed possible to achieve a new, more likely balance. Tang stroked his chin, glanced at Owen, who was currently looking at him, and asked strangely, "Why are you looking at me?" "Owen, I'm waiting for your explanation. I haven't thought about how to deceive." No, explain." "You said it out loud," Owen said, crossing his arms, speechless. Really? Then I'll be careful next time." Tang shrugged, not intending to force an explanation. There were too many things to explain, such as marionettes with independent consciousness, strange high-dimensional spaces, doing something preemptively at every turn, and various strange blessings and rituals, muttering to himself when idle, and so on. Many debts don't weigh you down. In this situation, Tang redirected his gaze to the giant usurpant. Separation is only a matter of time. After the separation, Owen, you will accommodate the uniqueness once, and then we will transfer it to the Black Knight Goddess. Using the power of the observer, and the deception of the three mystic pathways, he could stabilize another sequence 0 death. It just lacked the uniqueness and only had 2 portions of sequence 1 Beander characteristics, but it had a high enough status and could actually do many things, ensuring its own safety. Eternal darkness was bound to be born, and clearly, the Black Knight Goddess was the better candidate. As for Owen, it's better to be a sequence 1 archangel. The struggles at the top, let the taller ones bear them. That position wasn't so easy to sit in. Owen saw that Tang was changing the subject again and, after thinking for a moment, decided not to continue on that topic. People always have secrets, and not asking might be the correct approach. If he asked, it would probably be in vain. He looked at Tang, thinking silently in his heart. At the same time, East Continent, Silver City. Nicola walked on the bustling street, and among the giants, the figure of this era appeared particularly prominent. However, no giant ever noticed a figure wearing a black silk top hat walking beside them. Lightning constantly flashed across the sky. Nicola looked up at the sky and softly complained that he had rarely come out from underground, only to still see no blue sky. Forget it, I'll complain later. The current focus was, how to make Derek Berg's parents die, reasonably. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.